I'm sorry.
Welcome everyone to the October 16th Fairfield Committee meeting. Can someone ask him to turn it down a little bit? Okay. I'm Marcy Spoyer, your deputy moderator. Mark McDermott is out. Let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Right now, I'd like to take a moment of silence for all innocent people who have died so tragically in Israel and Gaza. We hope for a safe return of all the hostages and for a quick path to peace. Let's all have a moment of silence. Thank you. We're going to start with presentation order 1, which is items agendas 4 and 5. Let's see, do I see anyone here? Mr. Bodie, Ms. Pacelli, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Elstone, or Mr. Diavanzo? Are there enough chairs? Hi, thank you. Just remember you have to push the microphone down when you speak. If you want to give us a little bit of overview of the, we're talking about the pump stations and the force mains.
Yes, originally there was $300,000 approved for Fairfield Beach, South Pine Creek, and Center Street. We conducted a quality-based selection for an engineering firm. Following the state of Connecticut guidelines, we chose a firm. They looked at the project. They came up with a scope of work. There's an additional $300 and something thousand that they feel needs to be done because the 3 pump stations are in flood zones. So we're asking for the additional money. This will possibly be refundable along with construction cost if it's approved by the state and we go through with it. In order to get refunded, we would have to, the engineering firm would have to come up with a design for each station, present it to the state would have to approve it, and then they would be able to proceed or not proceed. So there would be no money spent to the engineer until the design for each station is approved by the state of Connecticut DEEP.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Representative Gale.
Hi, Hannah Gale, District 6. Could you just give us just a little more information on what they found and what they think, the situation is and what, what
They haven't found a lot yet. They have to do a lot of work to identify the proper way to build the stations for the flood zones. They have to look at the structure. If it has to be modified to come up to current codes, they have to look at future flows. They have to look at they have to assess the pipe, the force main in the ground. They have to look at everything. So before they do that, it has to be kind of drawn up and sent to the state.
Okay, excuse me. So the money that we previously approved is just not even in the ballpark for them. Like you have to have this money approved before they'll even accept the bid or the project.
The 900 could be used and used only, but then we wouldn't qualify for the quality-based selection reimbursement from the state. Clean Water Fund.
I see. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Representative Brown.
Christine Brown, District 9. I was just curious, why is the cost for the second project, the Toll House, Mill River, Eastfield, and Willow Street, so much less?
That's just basic initial work to be done. This is structures. It's not a full-blown design. This is kind of just the first step. This is information that won't go bad. This is just kind of preliminary work, and it kind of falls later in the waterfall, years out. So this is kind of work that could be done in between, waiting for the state to approve the first phase one, if you will.
So is this like the 300 that was already approved for the previous projects? The other ones, the Fairfield Beach, Center Street, and Pine Creek?
The 275 or whatever it is for all four, and it's just kind of preliminary work. So that 275 will cover all four.
Okay, so it's not apples to apples, the two. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Estrada.
Yeah, I can ask to read a District 10. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding and following up on Representative Gale's question. So are you basically saying that we need to spend the additional $336,000 so that we don't have to spend any money and qualify for some sort of a grant or reimbursement? Am I understanding that correctly?
We're following the rules of the quality-based selection that the state put forth. So that extra money is work that needs to be done in order to qualify for reimbursement down the road for design and for construction.
Okay, so this is work that does need to be done
Yes.
according to, okay,
Yeah.
I gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other question? If anyone on WebEx has any questions, just put it in the chat. All right, seeing none, thank you. I don't believe you have to come back next week, but if the moderator sends you a message, thanks.
We're good with both?
I believe that was covering both. I believe everyone had the, great, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to presentation order 2, which is agenda order 6, 7, and 8. The Holland Hill and North Stratfield roof replacements. We have Mr. Papageorge here. I'm not sure if anyone else is here for that. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. What you have before you is the North Stratfield roof replacement. This was in our waterfall, but it was moved back to this year as opposed to next year. The reason for doing that is as we move forward with our air conditioning of the building projects, we felt it was an essential time to get the roof replaced before we start putting new equipment on. So then we wouldn't have to backtrack to replace existing equipment. We evaluated the McKinley roof project that was on the waterfall this year, and we've felt comfortable pushing that for a year out to make room for this project. So that's where you see the North Stratfield roof on there. The other roof you see on here tonight is the Holland Hill partial roof replacement, which was on our waterfall for this year to be completed. You guys approved funding last year for design work on that one, so we are getting ready to go out to bid. These are before you tonight and this month because of our deadline to apply for the state for reimbursement. If there's any questions on either of those.
Thank you. Did you present this at the Board of Selectmen meeting earlier today?
We presented at the Board of Selectmen. It passed and moved forwards with a 2-to-1 vote.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions? Oh, Representative Kuhn.
District 7, just a general question for all of these roofs. Are you going to put solar on them afterwards as well?
So the town had placed moratorium on solar, but it has been lifted and we are working to get solar on roofs at this point.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Representative Myers.
Jim Myers, District 8. I noticed that the estimates were, on one of the roofs was just based on an estimate and the other one was based on an actual bid or something from Gilbane. Is that?
So the North Stratfield roof is based on design documents. That is correct from Gilbane and from our engineer from the AC project. So they were able to put good numbers on those projects moving forwards. The partial roof replacement number was based on the original project cost, and we still feel comfortable with that number.
Do you expect that Gilbane will do both roofs?
We do not. We expect to go out to bid with them, but we'll see.
Thank you. Representative Garskov?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Josh Garskoff, District 5. I'm not sure if you can answer this, but I'm wondering about the solar moratorium and the restart of that. Can you explain both of those?
I do not have the details with me this evening.
Mr. Hurley, are you able to explain both of those? The solar moratorium and then the restart of solar, are you able to explain the context for those two? Okay, thank you.
Do you want us to find that answer from?
It's really a side conversation. We don't need to hold this.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Mr. Garza.
Andrew Graceffa, District 6. Can you confirm that the roof replacement for both schools, the areas that are going to be replaced, are going to be brought up to current code performance, and then any light colored roofing material will be used for them?
That is correct, and we will get a 20-year warranty on them.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. I don't believe you need to come back next week, but I'll have the moderator reach out if so.
No problem. Thank you.
Representative Kuhn is up to discuss the Energy Committee update. Do you want to go to the presentation station?
No, I want to postpone until next week.
Okay. I'll let the moderator know. All right, moving on to order number 4. Agenda item 9, Safe and Livable Streets Ordinance. We're going to have Representative Gerber and also, I believe, Attorney Baldwin is present if we have any questions.
Yeah, thank you. Attorney Baldwin, I think as everyone has seen, did a review of the Safe and Livable Streets Ordinance, provided comments. I responded to those comments, so I'm not sure how best we should move this forward. Should we just go comment by comment? Because I think we need to dispose of the comments because we'll be voting.
I think that's good.
Yeah.
So I trust that everyone went through those documents and they read the comments. And some of those comments, one in particular, was rather open-ended and inconclusive on my part. There was an early one where I explained that it was important to understand from my perspective, and I think everyone's perspective, that what the existing policy is or is not, whether it's being implemented, and if it is, to what extent, fully, partially, what have you. Because this ordinance, and I'm speaking broadly here, generally, is, in my opinion, a redo of that policy which was created by the Bike and Ped Committee over a period of 3 years, and with a lot of research and background and meetings, of course, that finally resulted in that policy. Based on Representative Gerber's responses to my other question, which was, what is the complete streets policy that is being referenced throughout that document, because it was unclear to me what that was, and it was clarified that that is in fact the September 26, 2018 complete streets policy, which this is now supplanting, or maybe, if I understand Representative Gerber's take on it, now adopting or incorporating by reference. And I have to confess that I have not taken the time, I have not had the time since this was presented to me for review to compare and match those two policies. My understanding is that there are many, many similarities, and that would make sense, I guess. But are they redundant? Are they consistent? And if they're not consistent, then we need to rectify the inconsistencies. And that's just a general comment concerning my review of this proposed ordinance, which, if you can't tell by now, I think is nowhere near ready for finalization. Certainly not from my perspective. I would be very uncomfortable passing or what should I say, endorsing the document in its current form with all these outstanding questions at hand. I'm happy to go through the document piece by piece, but whatever the RTM thinks is appropriate. I also asked several questions about the cost, both the administrative costs, the actual costs, and the costs associated with the time involved in implementing this version of that 2018 policy. It's my understanding that this policy is supposed to fast track things, and based on my preliminary discussions with engineering, I'm not convinced that that's the case. In fact, I think that the opposite will happen. And based on my discussions with Bill Hurley, who's here to explain in more detail or give you numbers or estimates, that the cost would go up a great deal. How much it would be, I couldn't tell
Point of
you.
order, Mr. Baldwin is here, I believe, for legal representation, not for budgetary reasons.
If Attorney Baldwin, if you could stick to the legal
I
matter.
think this is all pretty relevant. It's his take on reading this.
But
and he's giving it to us back.
it's not his role to talk about costs.
It was one comment out of a number of comments he made.
That's okay. There should be none.
All right, let's go on to the next comment. Thank you, Attorney Baldwin.
Again, generally speaking, ordinances, every word, sentence, phrase in an ordinance should have meaning according to standard legislative interpretations. And I don't think that this is it meets that standard of a well-crafted and kind of poetic, if you will, ordinance, which ordinances or statutes should be. They should be the bare essentials and the fundamental building blocks of what is to be and what is not to be. And this is more akin to a policy document than it is an ordinance. And that's okay. But it goes back to my other comment about it having to be better integrated with the existing policy, which it incorporates. With that being said, I don't know if you want to hear from Mr. Hurley or if you want me to go on comment by comment.
Representative Gerber, do you want to comment or?
Yeah, I think, this is a matter of interpretation and values and all that. I've had this, the people that have reviewed this are not the town attorney, but some incredibly qualified people have reviewed this, including attorneys who work in municipal government and as municipal, attorneys. So I think in the end, the important thing to me isn't hearing the value judgments of our town attorney, because he has a certain perspective. I've spent now about a year on this with a lot of very qualified people. And for me, what's really important is to go through the legal issues, and we can do it one by one. Like, I'll stay all night. I think this needs to be passed next week at our meeting. I think it's ready to be passed. I've always been really open to, and just have made it very clear, I'm open to legal issues that need to be fixed. Initially, when this came out of LNA, I made an effort to make sure that there weren't any issues where this ordinance would trample on the authority of any of the commissions or departments. And I met with, I ended up, meeting with the police commission and the chief of police. They had a concern about the inclusion of the bike ped committee in a role that would allow them to review and approve exemptions. They were concerned about that because the local traffic authority is the police commission, not bike ped. I agreed with that. I made that edit that's in here. But any other edits like that, I'm very open to. Other than that, in terms of broad senses of whether it's a policy document or, those are all, since I've had this reviewed by so many people, I feel confident it's a good ordinance. And I think in the end, we either have the votes or we don't, but at least it's very important to me that legally that there's no issues in here. Attorney Baldwin raised one potential legal issue, and I would like to make sure that we address that, one or two legal issues that he had raised.
Thank you. Why don't we go to questions and then we can go from there. Representative Astorita. Okay, Representative Gal.
Thank you. Mr. Gerber, I apologize. Last month, I was trying to get online and I wasn't able to speak, so I wasn't able to ask a question that should probably have been more appropriate last month. So I hope you forgive me. But what I'm confused about and what I haven't seen is where is because there's been significant paving, like in District 6 in my area, we've had repavement, we've had sidewalks added. Where is the waterfall? For the paving, that was the schedule that we've been on from the original bike and ped committee. And is there a comparison waterfall with this new bill?
Part of, and that's a really good question, Representative Gale. Part of this ordinance is to require something like a waterfall for complete streets. And we have a bike pedestrian master plan and a complete streets policy. The people who wrote those, regardless of what else is said tonight, the people who wrote those are 100% convinced that those have been sitting on a shelf and not being followed, that piecemeal some aspects of it may have been, but I have them here with me, and if I have all night, like I said, we can go through them line by line, but they've not been followed. The reporting hasn't been followed. It's do what you can when you feel like kind of thing. So I think that is exactly what we need. We need a complete streets waterfall so that we know the long-term plan of where we want to be in terms of street safety, street infrastructure, and that we can track it like we do our other projects on a waterfall.
Can I say just one more thing? I hope you don't mind. Obviously this, the timeliness of this in relationship to the terrible accident that occurred during the summer. And I, have been thinking about it a lot and the problem is obviously that, this is not an isolated incident. All through New England, my in-laws live in Maine, the same kinds of things happen. These roads and these streets were just, were built originally so narrowly, and it's just ubiquitous. I mean, through the entire region, we have this problem. And so, I think that, that it is a very ambitious and an idea that really needs to be looked at, but it seems like we need quite a bit of time in order to try to figure out, where to start, if we're going to work on the larger roads that are in these more rural areas where this accident occurred. I mean, that's going to require an awful lot of, legal and engineering changes in order to, widen roads and, maybe add sidewalks, because right now it's such a large problem is I guess what I'm trying to say. It's easy to pave in the, more in the more urban area, but the rural is the issue for me. Thank you.
Yeah, you've addressed a lot of things there. First of all, you're right, it is happening all over the place, and that's why other municipalities are really being aggressive and trying to attack this problem. We started, and I think the people who commented last month, and you may not have been able to hear them when we had our meeting, they were very clear that when we adopted our Complete Streets policy, we were given accolades by the national organization that sort of tracks this stuff, because we were a pretty early adopter, even though it was an endorsed policy. It really wasn't necessarily going to be followed, but I think at that point they didn't know that, so they gave us accolades for that. Over the coming years, we have become somewhat of a laggard. I know that we do some of this work, but in terms of pulling it all together into a cohesive strategy that's transparent, we are a laggard. There are many things that other municipalities are doing that we just have not been able to do. Certain high traffic areas, things like raised crosswalks, slightly raised up. If you go to Stamford, you'll see crosswalks that are, you just know you feel it, even if you've never studied this stuff, that they're just much safer. You see street designs in other municipalities that we have not really looked into yet. Although, there are some signs that, these things might start inching into our paving plan, but we've been very, very slow to adopt some of these street safety infrastructure. So really, this is not something scary in terms of, boy, this is going to cost us a lot of money. This is a process document. This is a document that says if you read it, maybe, a couple of times, I think I went through this last week. This is a document that designates a person as the coordinator. So you're no longer uncertain of who to talk to. You're not, and I talk to a lot of people more now than ever before, but people send notices into the police and some others into Bill Hurley and some others into, Mega. They don't really know how to approach a street safety problem. Part of this is to designate one person as a coordinator of street safety. Another part of it is when we do a street improvement project, from major ones through paving, a review has to be done of what could possibly be done to make that street safer at the same time as they're doing the street paving project. This is actually pretty typical of all of the ordinances and the policies that you see around Connecticut and around the country, where they are actually following those policies, unlike religiously, as if it were an ordinance. Like West Hartford has been following their policy. So yeah, it's a problem everywhere, and I think most places are starting to address this, and we've been a little bit slow. this is going to force the town to make sure that for every pavement project, we're not just going ahead and paving for every, when we fix a bridge, we're not just fixing the bridge without thinking about, how people are going to walk and bike across that bridge. And to go through sort of a standard checklist, to have a standard set of Fairfield, the type of street infrastructure that we want to have in Fairfield, as opposed to the answer now that when you get, oh, what do you do when you do something to fix a street, make it more safe? The answer currently is we follow MUTCD guidelines. Well, MUTCD guidelines are, if you go and look at them, there's sections that say, well, if you have X number of accidents or Y number of deaths in here, you should think about this or that. That is the old style of thinking. It's very reactive. It's not what people want. People want a traffic expert to look at streets before the accidents, before the deaths happen, and say, what can we do? It doesn't mean that everyone's going to get a Cadillac answer. It means that you look for practically what you can do on that street, that it doesn't just get paved or improved, the surface improved without thoroughly thinking through what you can do that's appropriate for that street. So for example, what you just referenced, that, we had a tragic death, but as you know, it wasn't the first. It was the second in 3 years. What happened the first time someone died on that street was nothing, okay? What happened the second time on that street was then some movement was made in order to how to make that street safer. This hopefully will alleviate some of those gaps. So and it's not forcing us to go out and do all this work all at once. It's only when there's a street improvement project. So again, it's really a process. We want a process that's transparent, that's reliable, that's consistent, that people understand why certain things can be done, why certain things aren't being done. And that's really it.
May I finish?
I just have to make two observations here. One, the premise, as I said before, that this complete streets policy from 2018 has not been followed, based on my investigations with the people who are charged with implementing that policy, that is incorrect. And again, Mr. Hurley's here to discuss it. The other thing is that in the 2018, maybe this helps to explain it, in the 2018 document, in answer to one of the frequently asked questions, it states quite clearly that this policy only requires consideration be given to any new construction or reconstruction project. That is perhaps an explanation. I defer to Mr. Hurley on that score, but I just want to point out that it's my understanding that that has been applied to that extent. What this ordinance does is it expands the scope by a huge amount in terms of any paving being done whatsoever, which has its consequences. It's not for me to pass judgment on those consequences. That's the job of this legislative body. But it is my job to bring it to your attention and for you to do with it what you want.
Yeah, I'll go ahead, Representative Gerber.
Yeah, and this, Mr. Baldwin's entitled, Attorney Baldwin's entitled to his opinion, and I'm just going to flat out say, in my opinion, he's completely incorrect. That this, I have the policy in front of me. We can go through it line by line. And if I'd known that, that talking about this, I could have brought in the people that came last month and sort of came up here and said that the policy that they wrote And the plan that they wrote is not being implemented. But I don't want to, I don't want to get into that argument. Maybe it's a matter of interpretation. My interpretation is that the only reason I'm here today, and the only reason I spent the last year on this, was because it's not being implemented. And the people I've been dealing with are incredibly frustrated. They feel, people who have been trying to get traffic fixes feel like they've been given the runaround, they've been ignored. They don't know why someone's road gets fixed when another one doesn't. They don't know why someone gets a certain thing and another person gets another thing to fix their traffic. It seems somewhat haphazard as to who gets priority. And I can say personally, when I started sort of going out and looking at one particular area, all of a sudden that got more attention. So that's not the way we should be operating here. This is sort of an attempt to put, to turn it around a little bit so that it is, and if it requires a budget, maybe, I don't know if it requires a greater budget, but if we should be doing what we're supposed to be doing, maybe we're under budgeting, I don't know. But people should not be responsible for determining what it is that they think they need on a street. That's the town's job to go out. They should be able to say, my street's not safe, come check it out. And then the town should be able to go and say, you could do this or that. These are the best things to do. But you shouldn't spend 2 years trying to get a stop sign and then all of a sudden get that shot down and not, I hear this over and over and over again. So hopefully we can implement some structure around how our streets get safer. And we wouldn't be the first, we're a follower now.
Thank you. Representative Gallamos has direct comment to one of your questions. I'm going to move on to somebody else. Representative Estrada, I believe, was next.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Moderator. Ken Astrida, District 10. My questions are for Representative Gerber, and I do have a lot of them. One of the things, in reading through this document, and I'll be the first to tell you I'm not an attorney, I was very confused with respect to who's responsible for what the process is for getting things done. And I understand the passion that you bring to this. I think everybody in this room wants safe streets, but one of the first things that comes to my mind when I look at something like this is, are there other ways to make our streets safer rather than what I perceive as rushing through an ordinance of this size and the scope? And I understand you've said you've been working on this for over a year, and that's great, and I commend you. But it's only in the last couple of months that any mention of this has been brought to this body. Now, maybe you were talking with your caucus. That's fine, but I certainly was unaware of this. You said yourself that if there needs to be a budget item, well, so be it. But I guess that stems to one of my questions. We're going to pass an ordinance of this nature, this magnitude, which theoretically commits this town to capital expenditures. And you don't have any idea what the level of those expenditures is going to be? There was an article in the Connecticut Post just about 2 or 3 weeks ago that said Trumbull is looking to do one of these projects in their downtown area, and the cost is going to be $11 million. And they're looking to get the $11 million. If you're paying attention to the Capital Planning Commission meetings that take place within this town, you'd know that in the not too distant future, we've got schools that need to be refurbished, a sewer system that needs to be renovated. So are you then saying that the complete streets should take precedence over those projects? Are we to delay those projects? Or if not, are we to raise taxes on the taxpayers in this town? And so, I see all this and I don't see clear answers to it, but yet we have to pass this next week. That doesn't make any sense to me. Maybe we should start with better traffic enforcement for both vehicles and pedestrians in order to make our streets safer before we go down the route of passing an ordinance of this magnitude this quickly.
No, I appreciate your comments, and you're right. You just saw this a couple months ago for the first time. And I was working with people, outside, not with my caucus, with people who are experts in the field, in other towns, in this town, and actually other states as well. This does not commit the town to one dime. I mean, this is a review. So, I mean, when I hear what you're saying, what I'm hearing,
But it does reference a capital line item in the budget, right?
that could be zero if we, this commits the town to do a review of streets as they're being paved. Now, the town, Mr. Hurley, who probably would sign off on these things, may say, I've done the review and there's nothing we can do here. What this attempts to do is ensure that street safety is not ignored. So when I think the misinterpretation is that this is committing us to sidewalks on every street, or rumble strips on every street, or fog lines on every street, or chicanes on every street. No, I mean, complete streets are a very, very wide range of things that you can do. But Mr. Hurley would have to do a review of every street before it's paved, and then make a recommendation to actually tell the DPW these are the things we're going to do once it's approved by the local traffic authority. So, if we're not doing that, isn't that kind of weird?
That's
the arm.
That's not the point. What you said is fine, but I'm reading this here, and it looks to me like we have this coordinator, there's complete streets coordinator, but if something gets rejected, it goes to this other committee, which.
No, the other committee is the committee that it's been changed, it's been edited, as you see. It's our police commission that approves everything. Yeah.
Yes, but so the police commission can obligate the town to approve one of these projects on their own?
They currently do. Yeah, that's what their job is.
To what level of expenditure? I guess that's my question here.
Currently, the process would be usually someone, for example, Villa Avenue, kids are almost getting hit by cars or whatever, and while they're waiting for the bus, they go through a process of, in that case, we want a stop sign. They petition, and 18 months later they get rejected, and there's a whole process, and ultimately Bill Hurley, would come out, he'd do a couple of walkthroughs, and then decide on doing something else and go back to the police commission. They would approve it. It's kind of a Byzantine sort of
But then
process.
as well, so if, XYZ Street is being repaved, right? I assume, based on my understanding of this and what you've said, that opens the door for that street or that stretch of road.
Right.
To follow these guidelines.
So how bad are our streets? How poor are our streets? How much work do we need to make our streets safe? I don't know the answer to that.
But so what happens in, 10 years from now, we've got this, and Street A it's their turn to get paved, and they've got these, things that they want done, right? To make their street compliant with the complete streets regulations here. But for whatever reason, there was an emergency in the town, a school burned down, something like that. There has to be additional capital expenditures. The town doesn't have the money for that. So that gets rejected. But then, let's say 2 years later, the street over goes through the same process, but they get it because the town at that point in time had money budgeted for it. And I guess what I'm saying is, that's what is not clear to me, how that stuff is supposed to be handled in this.
There's an exemption process, and, Mr. Hurley or whoever's designee is, could go through the exemption process, which is basically fill out a form and send it to the police commission and say, you know, we want to exempt this street.
But I guess that's my point. Why should one street be exempted and another not?
I mean, that they shouldn't be.
So if you're
but
gonna put this in, if you're gonna do this, you do this for everyone. You don't make certain exemptions.
I mean, the intention is not to, but the town will want flexibility to make exemptions. So, of course, I mean, and it will be transparent. So instead of the black box that we currently have, where, you know, our police commissioners would come out and rule, you know, this would be more of a transparent process as to why there's an exemption. We would understand better, you know, why they're applying for one. And there were 60 days, there would be a ruling by the police commission.
Just a couple more. My time is basically up.
Your time.
You referenced that you've spoken to a number of different people that have reviewed this. Could you provide to the moderator the list of those people? And is it possible for them to to provide opinions on this?
I can't, because some of them work for municipalities and they asked me not to say who they were.
Okay.
But it doesn't matter. I mean,
It does matter, Bill. You're asking us to take credibility of people who are.
I'm not really asking you to take credibility of them. I'm asking you to look at it on a standalone basis. And, you know, I'm not gonna, you know, if you don't like it, vote against it. You can take my word for it. It's been, or not, you know, that it's been reviewed by people.
No, I totally believe that you've spoken to people, but I would like to understand what their credentials are and what their level of expertise is.
What you could do is go through and read the links that I provided at the end of which I think are going to come out based on Attorney Baldwin's recommendations, but they're links. What I know is difficult is because this is a body of volunteers and that most of you probably haven't read a lot of what I linked to or gone online and looked at this, but the sense that this is something incredibly aggressive or different, this really follows the key recommendations of Smart Streets America. And if you read that, and some of the model documents, you realize, most of this is just what people are doing around the country. So that's why, and yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say other than, if you didn't have a chance to read that stuff, I can understand why you think this is a big deal. It is a big deal, actually. It's a big deal in that it's stuff that we're not doing that we should be doing. But, I'm not going to talk about people who ask me to keep their names out of it.
Thank you. Representative Astrida, I'm going to go on to someone else, and if you want, then we'll go back. I think Representative Steele was next. Okay, Representative Carson.
Thank you. Laura Carson, District 4. Attorney Baldwin, you wrote that this is more than an endorsed policy from your conversations with DPW, that most of the stuff is being implemented other than the coordinator, maybe budget and reporting requirements. I just have a difference, something to bring up that doesn't fall into your category.
I probably missed a few.
So-
Like I said, the comparison between the two policies, I haven't had the bandwidth to do that comparison, although that comparison should be done.
Okay, just an example is, one of my constituents has been working on sidewalks for Churchill Road, and he had reached out and did a petition, and Bill Hurley and him had a back and forth, and I've been following his chain, and Bill Hurley had sent an email back to my constituent saying he's cleared the hurdle, but did a great job with the petition. He got a lot of people to sign on. But Bill Hurley did say town policy has been to maintain and repair existing sidewalk. Network town is 125 miles of sidewalk versus installing new ones. So the town policy is not about what I think Complete Streets is about, is when you need new sidewalks, they only want to fix them. So that's one of the things I see is imperative that we need to have complete streets so that we have a policy on sidewalks and not, maybe we have to have it not just be fixing them and have a policy where we don't add new ones.
I thought that the town has added sidewalks in town. Certainly, I guess not there, but I defer to
This is
Bill.
coming from Bill Hurley.
Hi, Representative, Bill, do you want to come on up?
Hit the button, sorry. I can give you an update even on that, Churchill. Number one, I did receive the petition. One of the things that the current town policy is that based on the beta report that we received in the 125 miles of sidewalk, it is estimated to be $14.5 million just to repair the existing sidewalks that are in town. Now, that's not to say we don't do any new ones. There's some people in town that might say that, but the town in engineering and some other departments have always strived to, for the new sidewalks, to go for grant money. And later on, if I can speak later on, I will show you that the town has about $14.5 million in sidewalk improvements, either just recently completed or soon to be completed or in design. And so I just wanted to highlight that. And as far as the Churchill, that does go before the police commission next month for at least line striping and some of the minor improvements that petition. But the sidewalks, that's a big issue. And the sidewalks, according to the beta report for 2022 pricing, is $445,000 a mile. So, you know, costs do play a factor of it. And we've been trying to chip away. I think hopefully everybody in the room here says we could use more money for sidewalks and improvements, that's for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure, Representative Horton or Steele first? I think, okay, Representative Steele.
Thank you, Jeff Steele, District 2. Just a quick point of clarification. Representative Kuhn asked or mentioned that the town attorney can't voice his opinion. He is an ex officio member. He can. So in terms of, again,
Let it be noted that it's opinion, not fact. We're listening to him for his legal advice.
We are also all giving opinions and the facts that we know. He has every right to as an ex officio member. So anyways, I did mention last time, I am not necessarily against this. In fact, I support parts of it. I support the concept. What is just concerning me a little bit, again, is some of the things Mr. Astorita mentioned, and that's the timing. And a couple questions first. One is, we talked about comparing with the existing plan and how it has failed. And we've often mentioned Mr. Hurley. Did he leave, by the way, already? Oh, we've mentioned him over and over. And he's right there, and we've put words in his mouth. He's right there. I'd love to hear what he says about the claims that we've failed. But in any case, I mean, I'd like to ask, do we not take street safety in consideration when we pave? But in any case, moving on, the cost is certainly a concern, and we don't even know. We think we know, we might get some grant money, we're not certain about cost. That has to be concerning to this body. The timing is very important. There's a lot of documentation that's come our way, a lot of things we're considering, a lot of pieces to this. Yeah, it'd be great to hear from the experts that you talked to. Okay, you want to keep some of them confidential. There's still a lot of questions, and I don't necessarily understand why, if the noise ordinance itself took us 10 to 12 months as a body to go through, why we're trying to push through something that is pretty significant and far-reaching, and not necessarily bad or good, but just complex. Why we're trying to do this, in 2 months' time. this body, many people in this body are still gonna be here next term. Why can't this be continued? We do this thoughtfully, thoroughly. We do it in a bipartisan way, and I think there can be bipartisan support. But we do it in that way, and we get everything answered, everything addressed. I mean, wouldn't we want that? I asked the same question at our meeting last week, and I think you also said that the town attorney said there was just one legal issue. Sounds like there are a number of legal issues to go through that we still need to talk about, unless there really is just one.
I thought there were two.
It seemed like there were many. There's a lot of red line in the document, but we can certainly go over that. And, you know, we talk about, is there a process for traffic safety? We have the Fairfield's traffic safety process roadmap here, and there's a process. So I will stop. I know I'm giving my opinion right now, but there's a lot of maybes and a lot of incomplete answers. And so why not work together to get these answered and addressed? And I think we just need some more time to go through it. Again, I'm not trying to blow this up, but just simply let's take some time to go through it. I would like to hear from Mr. Hurley.
Well, can I respond first? And yeah, we
go ahead.
definitely should. First of all, I appreciate your comments, but in my opinion, in many ways, this is actually less complicated than the noise ordinance. This is a process of designating a certain person to be in charge of coordinating complete streets. It is a process of reviewing street safety through a checklist, and there's already a checklist on the complete streets policy that hasn't been followed, and that could be the checklist. And there's a requirement that the town show what Representative Gale said, sort of a waterfall, so that we know what is planned, what we have an agreement on what the overall plan is and what the plan is for the current year and how we're going to achieve that plan. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It doesn't require noise meters, or it doesn't require, I just think that is pretty straightforward. So what else? That's basically it. I think your opinion about, whether it's ready or not, my opinion is that it's definitely ready. Whether you think the police commission is the current process is functional, that's a matter of opinion. I mean, I'm convinced that it's not a well-functioning process, that it's confusing. I am 100% confident that most residents, at least the ones I talk to, are not happy with it. They do pay their taxes, they do have kids, they do have parents, they do themselves walk the street and ride bikes. They're not speaking out of ignorance when they talk to me about this. So just asking the people that are currently doing the job, you get a perspective. But I think if we do what many other towns are doing and turn this around on its head a little bit through a process like we're talking about in this ordinance, ultimately people are going to like it, even the people that are responsible for it. I'm convinced that Mr. Hurley will be very happy once this goes into place, whether he knows it or not.
I just have a real quick response. One is, remember, you've been working on this for a year, right? We've been reviewing it for less than 2 months. So you may think it's ready, and maybe parts of it are, but we all have to think it's ready and have everything answered and addressed. I don't know have you met with the director of DPW, the Bike and Pedestrian Committee?
Bike pedestrian committee, they're advocates. they're going to advocate for what they're going to advocate for. They're not really a part of this process.
I thought you were a big part of it.
Excuse me?
I thought they were a big part of the perspective on this.
No, former members, the ones who formed the committee and the ones who wrote the policies, who have since left that committee out of frustration, were part of this. But, you know, again, going and asking the people that are doing things the way they're doing it, that, you know, this is too serious a matter for the public, when we all see what's going on in our streets every day. And I think it's too important to wait.
Why can't you wait a few more months to go through it? Why does it have to be done next week?
Well, because I don't know if you're going to be on this body. I don't know who's going to be on this body next. And in my opinion, and I believe in the people I talk to, their opinion is this is ready to go. There's really no reason to wait. But that's a matter of opinion. And if we have the votes, we have the votes. And if we don't, we don't. But if there are certain things that you want to, you know, if there are certain really material things that you want to raise, maybe it's not ready. I mean, if you raise something that none of us have ever thought of, including people who have put these in place in other places, I am open to that. I do not want to put something in place, and that's why I wanted to talk to the other town bodies, just to make sure that I wasn't trampling on anyone's authority. And I went to the bodies that I thought might have that sort of issue, like planning and zoning, and the answer was no. Then I had a meeting with the police commission and the police commissioner and the police chief, and the answer was, yeah, there's this one thing that we don't like, which I edited. So, you know, I don't want to put something in place that is a legal issue, but from a process issue, this thing works.
Thank you, Representative Horton.
I think we were going to have Mr. Hurley come up and just.
Did you ask that through me?
I did ask.
I heard you say you wanted to, but I didn't know if you asked it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Madam Moderator, could we have Mr. Hurley just address
Mr. Hurley, can you?
Thank you. So Mr. Hurley, I guess my personal question, others may have others, but the 2018 policy and its supposed slow implementation, can you comment on why that may be the perspective of some and how this new policy will impact the old policy or improve it from your perspective?
Again, Bill Hurley, Fairfield Engineering Manager, Town of Fairfield. To answer the question is, we feel that we have been following, in general, the Complete Streets policy. One of the areas that we could improve on certainly is the reporting issue. I have no issue on that. However, there's a lot of things that we do behind the scene that a lot of people might not be aware of. I can go into a mini little presentation that I have kind of defending engineering, if that's all right, or I could just answer the question directly.
Why don't you answer the question for now, and then we have a lot of members of the body who have additional questions, and then at the end, if.
Yeah. Well, in a nutshell, we feel we've been following the policy. Some things do take longer, especially if there's any road reconstruction. Those are larger projects based on something that I have here. There was something from frequently asked questions. I still have to hold this down, right? Okay.
You're doing a good job.
Thanks. This was just to give a little background of that Complete Streets. The Complete Streets policy was intentionally, it didn't have enough teeth to some people, but to other people, it had more than enough teeth. So it was somewhere in the middle. The purpose of that was for complete streets enhancements would be incorporated in the original design of a project that would add little or no cost. Better striping, better crosswalk placement, providing handicap ramps and improved signaling would add little or no cost. The complete streets policy, and this is true, have helped qualify for additional funding sources. Very little time would be spent to apply complete streets concepts. The proposed is a policy, not a plan. The policy, and this is the main difference between what's being proposed and now. Again, as Jim Baldwin said, it's for you guys to decide. The policy requires consideration to any new construction or reconstruction project. In this way, any major project in town would be given consideration for complete streets enhancement that could provide significant benefits to residents in a cost-effective manner. We are not aware of any grants which require a policy, but obviously it's very helpful to if you have one, to get those grants. Then it says here, who is the keeper of the policy? They said policy was covered entirely by the jurisdiction of DPW. They understand their responsibility and agree to this policy. The Volunteer Bike and Ped Committee is charged with providing an annual report that would be distributed to the town staff, in particular DPW, engineering, TPZ, health, economic development, Board of Selectmen, and the police. So that's where that comes from. We feel we have been, if you look at the complete streets and prior to it, the master plan, we have implemented almost all the bike routes in that plan, with the exception of the Greenfield Hill ones, because those roads are narrower and we haven't gotten to them yet. And as far as sidewalks, we've done 30 streets in, say, the last decade or so regarding that. So, thanks.
Thank you, Representative Horton.
Thanks, Margaret Horton, District 9. A couple things. First, just thinking about the way in which we sort of look at improving the safety of our streets and sidewalks now feels very ad hoc and frankly, potentially unjust in different ways, in the sense that if I happen to live in a neighborhood where residents have the capacity to, start a petition, have the time to go out and collect signatures, et cetera, and then be able to go to the meetings, et cetera, then I'm more likely to live in a safer neighborhood versus a neighborhood where maybe people don't have that capacity. So I think that that's something that we have to really look at. But again, the way that we are doing it now feels reactive. And so it's very hard for me to understand why we wouldn't want to have this more comprehensive, proactive approach. Why Fairfield wouldn't want to be a leader on complete streets. We are, lagging behind right now. So it is hard for me to kind of understand that. Obviously, funding cost is important to all of us. I think something that's important to remember is there is, in fact, a lot of money out there, grant money for this, but in order to access many of those funding streams, we have to have this ordinance in order to really demonstrate our commitment as a community to this. So my question, I guess, is perhaps not one that can be answered very, very easily because it's more of a philosophical one, but I guess my question is less about what is the cost of putting this into place, but what is the cost of not putting this into place? How does that get quantified? And particularly in terms of the lives of our residents. I mean, I have, my children walk around my neighborhood, their friends going downtown. I mean, it's terrifying some days to think about, sort of the accidents that could happen. And I really think that we as a body have to think about the cost of not doing something.
Okay. I agree with some of the things that you said, certainly. I've been a member, pseudo member, I guess, of Bike and Ped Committee since it was implemented in 2011. I've seen 4 or 5 different chairmen. Matter of fact, one of the former chairman is on the RTM. But one of the things, right now, there is no grant that says you have to have a complete streets ordinance. However, as I mentioned even before, having a complete streets policy, I think, was very vital to get those grants. And as far as haphazard or figure out which neighborhood gets it or whatever, I'll just flash back from the whole decade of 2010 to say 2020. there was $70,000 of sidewalk money allotted for the town. So it was extremely limited. So when you, and, that's why we went for the grants. So what would typically happen would be is any neighborhood that seemed to get the support would, I mean, if you, as an engineer or as a body that has to make a decision on this, if you have, and I'll use an example just off the top of my head, Roland Road was scheduled to have a sidewalk. But then there was a petition of 12 people that wanted the sidewalk. And then 2 days later, there was a petition of 17 or whatever that didn't want the sidewalk. Meanwhile, at the same exact time, Jackman Avenue, they had a petition of 26 people that signed it. So that at the time, the first selectman said, well, I'm not going to battle this neighborhood that's, 50-50. Let's give it to Jackman. And so that's kind of been the policy of the ones with neighborhood support, because there's limited dollars, that's where it goes. Now, fast forward to say 2021 or 2022, with the ARPA money, the town has obviously now been able to do more sidewalk improvements. And with the beta paving report, which I think you were all exposed to that, right, last year, where now that's where a lot of these decisions are based on. When a road gets paved, we are committed with the ADA to do the handicap sidewalk improvements, ramps, and any major sidewalk repairs are done at the same time. So we have that in place, and then I think that's what I was referring to with the current policy is with the $14.5 million in the hole trying to eliminate liabilities of trip and fall and some of the other ones. The priority certainly is to repair the existing sidewalks, but it's not to say totally ignore the new ones.
Do you have a follow-up? Just a quick follow-up. First of all, I do appreciate everything that you're doing, truly. I think you made a really great point when you talked about how, that example of 12 people want this sidewalk, 17 don't. And to be honest, that's sort of, I think, a big point of this is that as a town resident, I'm a layman when it comes to this. I don't necessarily know what are the appropriate traffic calming measures, that need to be instituted in my neighborhood, which is why I don't think that is the best system versus having this proactive kind of approach from the town when the paving comes up to say, okay, this is what's necessary versus the neighborhood residents saying it.
Thank you. Representative Wackerman.
Thank you. Representative Wackerman, District 7, new District 9. I don't know what to say anymore. We have different districts. So I had a couple of points to make. One is that if, well, first of all, I appreciated Attorney Baldwin's comments on the statute, because I think you raised some practical questions that are worth thinking about. I think Representative Gerber responded to most of them, but I think there were some things that were thoughtful. But I guess if I think your point was that this is already, and both of you are saying this is already a policy and we're already implementing it. So I guess that raises a couple questions for me. If we are, then the question of cost could be tracked historically. If there's things that the Complete Streets policy has, led to being done on the streets or the sidewalks, then we could go back and look at those costs. But because we can't possibly know in the future what streets are going to need to be paved or whatever. But if it's already being applied, this just gives it some structure, and a person who will be a specialist in this kind of thing who can help Mr. Hurley with his work. I can't see why anybody would be against it if it's continuing what was approved and what is planned on. And I keep hearing it's so complicated. This is so complex. We need lots of time to study it. It's really not. It's as Representative Gerber pointed out, it's just a few basic things, hiring someone, having a manual about how to address this, and applying a policy that already exists and maybe is already being implemented. So I think it's not really very complicated. Also, Representative Gerber, I think you said this, but I could be wrong, that other towns that have these ordinances have some similar, they're very similar ordinances to this, and they're making it work, right? Am I right that that this is sort of based on some others in Connecticut and the model ordinance as well?
So this is an amalgamation of other ordinances in Connecticut, but also towns that have policies that are sort of followed like ordinances, as well as the Smart Growth America, 10 requirements for a complete streets policy ordinance, or ordinance, and some other model ordinances from organizations that do this work. So it's different. I mean, all of them are somewhat different, sort of based on what, for example, if you look at New Haven, their ordinance is one page, but built into a 50-page, handbook with design manual. Same, I believe, similar to Stamford. I mean, they have these very kind of thick design manuals, and that's something we don't have. Hopefully, we'll develop this if this passes. So it's kind of, it's an amalgamation. They're all different.
But I guess it's based on,
I read basically everything available, and then the parts that made sense, I added them, and then some other people, like from other towns, like New Haven, Stamford, and other states sort of read through it and said, you should add this or that.
thank you. And then I know Attorney Baldwin raised some questions about how it will actually work, and you pointed out in your responses to him that this will be the first selectman who's deciding what department it's in and things like that. And I think that's a normal thing with a statute, that the actual implementation is determined by the administration.
Thank you for bringing that up. I can't remember if it was Representative Astreet or Representative Steele, about the, there are things in here, that are there in concept that have to be operationalized, and this is an ordinance that would allow the administration to operationalize them. So, for example, like I said in my comments, the Complete Streets Coordinator, in my mind, it's always been someone who reports to Bill Hurley. And that makes sense to me, and not necessarily hiring someone. It could be someone who's, I think we have people that could do the job probably. So, but whether, the first select woman wanted to do it another way, that would be up to her.
And then I just had one other comment, addressing the discussion between Representative Steele and Representative Kuhn. I think, although Attorney Baldwin can comment on policy, I think it's important for us to know when it's actually legal advice and when it's your opinion. So I think that's the only point Representative Kuhn was making, was that of course you have opinions and you're an ex officio member, but we just need to know when it's really a legal advice and when it's a policy opinion. I think you'd probably agree with that.
I do agree with that, but I just want to clarify that I was asked to review this and to make sense of it. And what I was expressing was my sincere feeling that in that legal review, it was not perfectly matched with the existing policy. And I had not had the opportunity, the bandwidth to make that comparison and to make the two work together as I believe they should, especially since I've learned from Representative Gerber that the policy he was referring to is that very policy, which was one of my major questions in the document. So it's just the due diligence that I owe this body and everybody. I was just expressing my the fact that I do not feel comfortable having done my due diligence in that regard. Now, I understand that Representative Gerber feels that he's spoken to outside counsel and that's something that hasn't happened with me. I would have very much appreciated the opportunity to sit down and go over this line by line with those attorneys and experts and Representative Gerber himself, but that opportunity has not been afforded to me, as I, in my opinion, think perhaps it should have been in my role as town attorney. I also just want to add the one comment that was made, Representative Wackerman, was that it's not the same policy as the 2018. It is a large expanse of that policy by its scope and by its requirements. So there is a significant difference there. But I'm learning as we speak and as I listen to Representative Gerber, I'm getting a better understanding of the intent and how this is supposed to be merged with that existing policy. And that's great, but I'm learning this as we review it together tonight. And hence my original comments, which some interpreted as being an opinion that I haven't done my full due diligence that I owe this body.
Thank you. Did you have a comment, Representative Gerber?
I do. I just, I've got the Complete Streets policy in front of me, and just want to make clear, I've read all this stuff, multiple times, and we're not proceeding with this sort of lightly. But let me just read the policy scope from the Complete Streets policy that was endorsed by the Board of Selectmen. Fairfield Complete Streets policy covers all users of the streets in town to ensure that each has a safe, efficient, and comfortable passage. As defined in Connecticut General Statutes 13A 153 FAD, indicated in Connecticut Department of Transportation Complete Streets policy, user means a motorist, transit user, pedestrian, or bicyclist. This policy recognizes that users include children, seniors, people of all abilities, people of all incomes, commercial vehicles, emergency, blah, 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 blah. The policy recognizes that all users of the streets in town, as listed above, are subject to the requirements of the appropriate statutes, blah, blah, blah. The Complete Streets policy shall apply to all local and state public roadways within town boundaries and includes the following: new construction, projects within the town's roadways, maintenance projects, except as indicated in section clear accountable exceptions, projects involving the reconstruction of transportation infrastructure and prioritization of project selection. Then it goes on to talk about some of the things. So maintenance projects are a part of this. Okay, the Complete Streets policy includes and applies to streets and other travelways, bridges, lighting, trails, and sidewalks in planning and during construction. This policy does not apply to private property, okay? And then this policy supports incorporation of best development practices and sustainable design as it relates to the streetscape, including street trees and appropriate vegetation, stormwater management, drainage design, and related elements, so that they are considered an integral component of the infrastructure of the town. These practices are often referred to in design guidance as green infrastructure and or green streets. So, I don't know. If you listen to this and you can make your own judgment, are we anywhere near that? And I understand that engineering does what they can do, but we are not anywhere near that, in my opinion, nor are we anywhere near that in the opinion of the people that wrote this policy. So regardless of what anyone wants to say and how they want to interpret where we are, the people who wrote it, that we're not, that this has not been a priority. And so we're going to make this a priority with this ordinance, and we're going to require a process that's clear, where people are accountable, with an annual sort of checkup that isn't happening right now. And my opinion is that the engineering department is gonna love it. You know, that's really what I believe. And that if it requires resources, which I'm not sure that it does, but if it does, then they should get it. But we're not clear on whether we need more resources right now.
Thank you, Representative Pistilli.
Sharon Pistilli, District 3. I just want to say that this can't wait. The day after the last committee meeting, people fly down Burroughs Road, and I was crossing the street with my dog, and I tripped. And my hospital bill was about $3,600, and I would rather pay my taxes and have people have a pedestrian safe street and not be in a boot for 8 weeks and miss work time and everything else. My question is for Mr. Hurley. With the sidewalk improvements, as a total percentage, looking back for the last 10 years, like how much of that has been covered by grants? And like in the future, how much do you think as a percentage we could have covered by grants?
I'd have to go back and get you the information.
Back of envelope,
exactly.
no, back of envelope, like just your gut
Yeah,
check.
okay.
If you don't want to provide it today, you could get it to the moderator.
But I'm okay with the gut check for now, just
Yeah,
general.
yeah. Offhand, as I said, we got 14.5 million in grant money that's either been completed or is in the hopper, so to speak. Basing on, and this is now, I'll just give you a couple of year look back. 2019, all right, the state was in a deficit. There was a $9 million cut across the, for the town. So that year, I imagine we had bare bones. 2020 was COVID, bare bones. So, this complete streets policy was.
I don't think those two are typical years.
No, right.
I'm asking for further back. I'm saying
Further back.
Follow
would
wax,
be
10 years overall gut check. What do you think? I won't hold you to it and you can give me a real number later, but just overall, what do we think?
The grants are probably, off the top of my head, 5 to 10 times more than what's been budgeted. And I think either side would agree on that.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Just to give everyone a heads up, we have at least 5 people on the list. So Representative McCabe.
Thank you. Representative McCabe, District 4. A question to Mr. Hurley, please. Do we as a town have any kind of comprehensive plan based on traffic safety, traffic issues, complaints, accidents, near misses, deaths, that looks at the overall town of Fairfield and makes decisions on projects based on bicyclist and pedestrian safety? Do we have like a list of projects in the hopper or a plan that's specific to that?
Yes, we do have a plan. It's always subject to change, but we have a plan in place. Typically, a lot of the grants and a lot of the concerns of pedestrians, unfortunately, which no one's even mentioned here, it involves the DOT. And unfortunately, that process can be excruciating at times. Whenever you deal with the state road, you have to not just deal with one state entity, but even up to 4 or 5 different departments. And I know Karen Wagaman is very familiar with the post and the Grassmere Post project. We thought we were ready to go in 2020, and just believe it or not, 3 months ago, the state says, we're not quite sure on the road diet. The volumes just aren't lining up. You either have to redesign it or do another traffic analysis to prove that we could reduce, the lanes from 4, 2 in each direction to 3 and process that. So it's very frustrating. The Southport connectivity, I'm using this as an example of some of the projects in the hopper. Southport connectivity, we thought we were very, very close. And then believe it or not, by moving a signal head, which is it's a little heavy when it's up on a wire, but we were moving it literally 4 feet and we had to do a span pole analysis. So that took 4 or 5 extra months. And then as an example on this one, which was the Stratfield Road Streetscapes project. On here we have, this is from July 2021. There's a guy named Ken, I won't use last names, but he was with our consultant. He left for a different job. And then the two state reviewers, Jason and Paul, are no longer with the state. So now you got to go through the whole thing all over again. So sometime, and believe me, I share the frustration with Bill and some of the past members of the Bike and Ped Committee is, why are these things taking so long? And these are the behind the scenes that unfortunately, I think everybody in town is frustrated.
Thank you. Specifically, though, I'm asking if there are comprehensive overviews, again, based on actual data as opposed to petitions and neighborhood complaints, which are important, by the way, because there are, people that are experiencing it, but it's like one layer of sort of data analysis. So what I'm asking is actually, do we have like an overview where someone has looked at the challenges being faced as far as safety is concerned for the entire town to understand what are the problem areas? What can we do? We've been hearing a lot about sidewalks, which are great. I love a good sidewalk, as I know everybody does, but we also know that there are a whole host of other things that can be implemented that can help slow traffic, more crosswalks, lighting. Sidewalks are only one, and as it turns out, an extraordinarily expensive piece of it. Do we have such a plan?
We basically go by each year the Connecticut crash data. It's a repository for crash data. And so the police department and a member of our engineering staff look at that. I look at it on occasion myself where we hit the red spots or the trouble spots. And so those are the areas where it could be roadway improvements. It could be safety improvements. Usually they go hand in hand. And again, it's part of the complete street is if we're going to do a roadway project or look at something, we would look at obviously, if we're improving or reducing a radius or something like that, then we would do the ramp, we would do the new sidewalk, we would improve lighting, we do pedestrian buttons and things like that. For some cases, the state and the town are working together with pedestrian improvements at the signals. The state is proposing 7 new signals. Unfortunately, we have 60 of them, but they're proposing 7 where they would be pedestrian improvements, where, you might see the hand and then the countdown, 20, 19, 18. It took the state 20 years to finally get going with that, and now they're moving with that. So as I said, a lot of the red spot or hot areas from the Connecticut Crash Repository are on state roads, and we're constantly working with the state on that. They have a list of those, and then there's even 6 other improvements that are going on at the same time. We have a traffic signal inventory where it was part of the ARPA money, and we were able to hire a consultant. They've now developed, and I'll be presenting some of that at the Capitol Workshop next week, of a 5-year plan on signals. And so, we're getting there. There's no doubt about it. And we're having plans in place for paving, sidewalk improvements, priorities near schools. We're working with the police department on improving all the school zones, working with the Board of Ed on that as well, and working with the DOT on the main corridors. So yeah, we do have a plan in place.
I think, first, thank you so much. And I think that one of the benefits of creating a new ordinance is to demonstrate a real need for a coordinator that can provide, honestly, the support that, you've described so many different stakeholders and players in all of this that can help to provide not only more, I think, of a methodical process for looking at all of the overall challenges in our town, but can also effectively communicate out to people to understand what are the rationale for making decisions and what are all of the different opportunities that we have aside from sidewalks to be able to address the challenge that we know exists because we see it every day in our streets. And it's not because people aren't, working really hard, but I think it's that comprehensive vision that'll be really helpful to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Zezima.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Liz Zezima, District 4. I want to thank all 3 of you for your various contributions. Representative Gerber for the extraordinary amount of time and work that's gone into this. Bill Hurley for, what you've been doing to implement that 2018 policy, and to Attorney Baldwin for his contributions. I would like to explain something to this body and to the public. I've heard in the past that this process itself is very confusing to people. So I've heard the word rushed used a couple of times. On July 18th, I did send an email to Republican leadership with a rough draft of this ordinance, and I requested co-sponsors. I never received a reply. So for the second time in 2 consecutive ordinances, we have a process that is dominated by the work this side of the room is doing and multiple questions and objections and concerns by the other side. I would like to recommend that we form bipartisan working groups going forward. That is the history of this ordinance. And it was copied to Democratic leadership and to Representative Gerber. To Ken Astorita, Representative Astorita's point, I do think there's concern in the public about police enforcement, which I'm sure I have no standing to speculate on how difficult it would be unless we're using technology. But I do hear as many complaints about the fact that people see cars blowing through stop signs and red lights and don't see a presence in those areas. So I don't know if that was part of the discussion with the police department. If you can add anything to that, Representative Gerber.
I have discussed that with the police department, and I think at one of our budget meetings, Chief Calamares did indicate that he's sort of all for using cameras for ticketing. And they say, just how difficult it is. They don't have the manpower to put at every stop sign, and they can send someone to a stop sign for a few days and then they leave, and maybe people change their behavior for a few days. And they aren't going to chase somebody in our town and put other people at risk. So it's frustrating for them. They do say that, when they do pull people over, a lot of times it's people who live in that area. The people who are complaining about speeding are often the ones who do speed. And but my reaction to that is that we still have to do what we can, because regardless of whether it's the people who live in those areas that are speeding, people are getting hurt, people are getting killed. And so we need to do what we can, and street infrastructure is something that, can work to help slow people down. But certainly when the cameras become available as a topic, it sounded like Chief Calamares was interested.
Thank you. I do have one more comment and then a few questions for Attorney Baldwin. I don't know if everyone here knows or remembers that the expansion of Mill Hill School actually failed due to traffic and safety concerns. And that goes back to when I was on the Board of Finance. But to Attorney Baldwin, I have a couple of questions. Do we currently have a risk manager?
I believe that Peter Ritchie has assumed that role.
Okay, and so within that, his responsibilities or that job description, is there a number calculated somewhere of what sort of liability we will have when someone is killed and we are sued? Because what they will see is that this has been debated, requests have been made, and if they did not result in action, I would not want to face that family's attorney.
Well, I'm quite familiar with the municipal liability laws, and I can tell you that it is a very challenging case to bring against any municipality. And furthermore, Mr. Ritchie is not so much involved in something like that as much as our KERMA, which administers our risk and helps cover our risk. And we do frequently present questions to the coverage people on issues that are presented to the town, such as that. And we're very wary of it, but there is a municipal liability exemption in the statute that is very difficult to overcome. So I don't want to downplay the importance of safety, but in terms of the context of your question and exposing the town to future liability, I just don't think that is in fact the case.
Okay, well, perhaps we can learn more about that at another time. Another question I have is, do you know when you will be able to complete the comparison between the Complete Streets policy and this ordinance? Certainly, I hope by next week.
I would have to drop just about all my matters between now and then in order to accomplish that task. And I'm not sure if even that is feasible or possible based on court dockets and deadlines for other matters. Again, I welcome the opportunity to, I think, based on what I heard tonight, is to boil this down further as, in my opinion, it should be, and simplified to its core aspects so that the purpose and the scope as articulated by Representative Gerber can be properly captured. And I don't think that is the case in its current form.
Representative Gerber, do you want to respond to that question?
I would, I can send, I think I don't know with the website with all the links being broken, since the new website went up, I don't know if people can access the Complete Streets policy. I have a copy. I can send it around to everyone if they don't have it. It's a very short document. It doesn't have a ton of meat in it. So I feel pretty confident that we're not going to find we're not going to find conflicts. I mean, I have it right in front of me. I could probably send it around now. If people want to read it real quick, we could take a break, or we could just review it while during the week and reconvene, the discussion next week before the vote. I am a little concerned. There are a couple items in this that Attorney Baldwin raised some legal issues, and I want to make sure that we get a chance to discuss those. One of them had to do with the Administrative Procedures Act. Oh, that's good. Thank you. Thank you. One of them had to do with the Administrative Procedures Act, and although the person I consulted wasn't quite sure what that involved, the other one was, but if there is an issue with that, we need to address it. The other one was, in this document, it calls for an annual joint meeting, and Attorney Baldwin initially was of the impression that that we can't sort of order a joint meeting, an annual joint meeting. And if that's the case, I think it's a simple fix that we just, break it up into separate meetings and leave it up to the first select person to, call the joint meeting if that's what they want to do. But I don't want to go into next week with any legal issues.
Thank you. I have one last question. I think it's for Attorney Baldwin. Again, for the edification of the public, in terms of implementation or execution, can you give us the legal differentiation between a policy and an ordinance?
Well,
Well, the ordinance uses a lot of language such as shall, and a policy is generally, I mean, I think you understand it as well as I do. A policy is more of a roadmap, whereas a statute or an ordinance is mandatory. I think that's the best distinction I could make. And I just want to clarify one thing. When I talk about merging the two policies, yes, that's important. And that may be quite simple to do, quite frankly. But I'm also talking about boiling down the existing ordinance as it is to its more essential, functional, purposeful parts. And that generally takes time. Anytime you write a brief or a letter for that matter, your first draft usually isn't your best. And the more you tweak it, naturally, the better it gets. And I think it needs some tweaking.
Well, thank you for that. So then a policy is obviously, I wouldn't use the word voluntary, but it's certainly not compelling, whether it's limited in scope as ours is or not. And an ordinance certainly is that we've adopted a law that requires certain action to be taken. Thank you.
Representative Gerber, can you actually forward that to the moderator? Because we do not have a link to that available to us. So the 2018 Complete Streets Policy, if you could forward that to Mark for him to forward to the body, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Representative Hurley, you have a response to Representative Zezima? Did I say Representative Hurley, Mr. Hurley?
That's okay. Might be an upgrade. I don't know. A couple of things I do want to mention. As I said, in the Complete Streets Policy, we were always under the impression that it's for major, projects, reconstruction and all that. And so on the checklist, which I admit, I haven't been filling out that particular checklist, but for all the grants and all the major projects, we have to do a bike and ped travel needs assessment form. So basically, it's a checklist of the same things. And so I've been using that instead of filling out the form. But one of the things I have to admit, because it came up at one of the last Bike and Ped committee meetings, and it's a question to Mr. Gerber, because this is something where the ordinance, depending on your interpretation, could take you a long way, or maybe it's not as difficult as I'm picturing it. But the Bike and Ped Committee, their first bike path or bike route was Mill Plain Road. And Mill Plain Road, we made it a bike route instead of a bike lane because it was our first one. And this way, parking would be discouraged in the bike route area, the shoulder, but you would still be allowed to park there. There was one neighbor in particular that seemed to park there all the time when they had what seemed to be a wide driveway. You could park. We had to approach them and say, you know what? You don't want to make this into a bike lane. If you like to park here, you better, move it. And they did move it. So that was good. But under the ordinance, someone that's pro-biking, and again, there's no right or wrong here, but they could look at it as, because as I said, it was brought up, is why do we need a petition or neighborhood support for a bike lane? Why don't you just do it? And I think it's really important to bring up this point because in the past, we've done some things where we didn't quote get all the public involved. And the next thing you know, the first selectman way back when or whatever would have us undo what we did. And so I'm trying to avoid that in the future. And so like with this, if a Complete Streets Policy, the next time we pave Mill Plain Road means now that you put a bike lane in instead of a bike route, well, now there's loss of parking. And that might, I don't know, but this 30-day appeal, it seemed to be, it was appealing if there was an exemption and you wanted the town to implement the complete streets. But what about the other way, when somebody objects to a tree cutting or if a utility is in the way, or if, in the case here, it potentially loss of parking. So I just want to make sure it's clear that, what's the intent here? Is it something that we work out? Is it something that has to be discussed later? Is that something that's already in the policy? It might make it easy. Oh, they approved the complete streets. We're done here. Sorry, But then all of a sudden, if you get a neighborhood, I'm thinking of that Rolling Road as another example where because I don't know if anyone's talked to anybody on Mill Plain Road. Luckily, there aren't that many people that park there. And just to let you know, both the police and engineering, if the neighborhood supported it, we have no problem at all with putting in the bike lane. It's just that if we put it in and then all of a sudden there's negative feedback, now we got, what do we do, black out the line or take out the no parking signs? So I was just curious how you pictured the 30-day appeal for when they don't want a sidewalk or they don't want some of these improvements. Yeah, maybe you have an answer, so.
Actually, can I ask you a question first? Do we have any separated bike lanes in Fairfield?
Only by a white line, like but a bike lane itself exclusive where nobody's allowed to park, no. No, we don't.
Well, I'm not quite sure how to answer that because putting in a separated bike lane, we're not going to be necessarily doing that as part of our Complete Streets review. That I hope would be recommended, but if there's a lot of different things you can do, and that's not necessarily one that you would have to do. This gives the town a lot of flexibility. I mean, you have the ability to recommend, but are you asking if you recommend it, are we going to do it?
Basically, what I'm saying is I know we have members on the current bike and ped, and I'm sure past bike and ped would love to have that as an exclusive bike lane. My question is under the proposed ordinance, does that mean we do it? But then what happens if there's people that say, I don't want a bike lane, or I don't want to give up parking? What happens? And if it's, well, you know what? This board or everybody approved it. This is a Complete Streets policy. You're right. That part will make it easy because then I don't have to say anything. But in the same token, it's going to be hard for anybody if there's 30, 40 people that are against something, then what happens? That's what I was getting at. Because right now, my understanding of the appeal process was only for appeals for people that if we said, I'm just using some dead end road, we didn't want to put a sidewalk or traffic calming on or something like that, that would be an exemption. But then they wanted that, then that would be the thing. And I think that was the intent for that. But what about the other side?
Yeah, I got it. Well, you have a lot of flexibility. You're going to have a lot of flexibility under this. I mean, you're going to have to do an assessment. And if the assessment that you make is that we should have a bike lane there, then I guess we're going to have a bike lane there.
If I understand Mr. Gerber's intent here, then with all that flexibility, which I didn't see in this document before, but I hear it now based on what's been said, and that's important for the reasons that you just stated. So that means that an exemption would be granted if it was deemed that after public dissemination, there was vocal anti-bike lane support, and it would be up to that coordinator, that individual, to seek the exemption. Have I got that right?
Sorry. Yeah, no, it's not making sense. The exemptions are for not adhering to the Complete Streets recommendations. So if there is a part of, let's say, one of the more remote roads, And, Mr. Hurley looked at it and said, I'm not gonna put fog lines here because no one walks here ever, or something like that. Then he would just fill out the form and say, we're paving this road and we're not going to do anything other than pave the road.
If you're enjoying our working session here,
I'm letting it go. If anyone has any objections, let me know.
just again, so I understand, I get the plan and the right-of-way documents mixed up sometimes in my head, but one or both of those dictate that you follow the Vision Zero guidelines, and that should be incorporated into the plan. And that plan, as I understand it, and this is a genuine question, would include a bike lane, and therefore Mr. Hurley or the coordinator, whoever it is, would have to deviate from that plan and put in a request for an exemption, or have I got that wrong? In other words, the plan is going to be created within 12 months of this ordinance, and that does not necessarily have to include all the Vision Zero requirements. Do you understand my question?
Vision Zero does not require that you put in a bike lane. I mean, Vision Zero is a conceptual framework, and Bill probably knows this as well as I do. It's a conceptual framework for striving to reduce, crashes and accidents and deaths. So you can go to the website and look at it. It's a mission statement, basically.
I don't want to pick on the bike lanes. We get it all the time when we do a sidewalk. There's trees or people's landscaping, or they just spent $20,000 on irrigation that doesn't belong in the town right of way, and then we got to make them rip it out. So I just want to let you know there's other examples.
Perhaps you guys could have like a conversation off the record later this week, or that would work. Let's move on to
May I just make one comment though? So we have a plan. We have got a bike pedestrian master plan. We've got a plan for Fairfield. We're going to have what appears to be hopefully some sort of vision or plan as part of the POCD, and which also, by the way, includes an ordinance in that as a next step for the town. And each year we're going to have a budget, a capital plan, sort of like a waterfall to achieve that plan, and we're all going to be able to see it. And if there's a bike lane for Mill Plain on that plan, then, people scream and yell about having a bike lane there, then I guess there's a chance to knock it off. But Vision Zero, Complete Streets Review, they don't require you to put in anything. They require you to do an analysis of what you think belongs there.
thank you, Representative Graspa. Andy, you were first.
Steve, Representative Graspa from District 6. Not Steve, Bill Hurley. Sorry.
That's okay, it's been a while.
It's been a long conversation. First of all, I just wanted to correct, at least from my standpoint, that I don't view this ordinance as an indictment of engineering. And at least from one of the co-sponsors, I don't want you to think that was at least I can only speak for myself. My intention is that this is an indictment of engineering's work, because you and I have worked together on a number of things. I am a former chair of the Bike Walk Committee. And I know that your brain and heart are completely on this issue. So I really appreciate your time and effort over the years. I do want to just sort of reinforce that this is taking, by and large, the policy and putting it into an ordinance with a lot more formalities within it, which is why I'm wholeheartedly supporting this. On a couple of anecdotal items, I just want to sort of ask a question to you, Bill. First, over the last 10, 12 years, your favorite complete street upgrade or bicycle, pedestrian, all-user, driver safety that we've done in town that you've been able to be a part of? And then second, I guess maybe a simple question or might be answered by the first. Do we have a segment or a street in town that you would consider a complete street right now?
There are several streets that at least have some components of the all everything, new sidewalks, new bike lanes, traffic calming measures and all that. I would have to say we had done the safe routes to school in the Uncle Road area, and it went out to Uncle Road West. That was a successful, what I felt would be a complete streets. The Four Corners project that's just wrapping up is one I think the town should be proud of. As an example, and we had to deal with the state on that one. A matter of fact, if you're going home that way, is it tonight? They'll be milling, I think today and tomorrow, and paving the next 2 days after. So just a heads up if anyone's heading over that way. And but those are the ones. But yeah, as I mentioned before, 30 sidewalks, about 24 streets that have at least a bike route. Those are things to be proud of, and some of the projects that we do have on, as I said, they're in the hopper, so they could quickly rise to the top when they're finally completed.
Just to add on one more piece. Thank you for that. I just wanted to give you a chance to sort of state on some of the successes you guys have had. And also, one of the reasons behind doing this ordinance is that a lot of our successes have been due to you and your department's sort of hard work over the past, over the decades. One of my reasons for supporting this ordinance is to make sure that it becomes an ordinance that it outlasts, your time here. That we actually have somebody designated as a that was a little bit morbid, but you get my point. That it's supposed to be permanent, So that's why I wanted to reinforce that point. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, I'm also training one. Many of you may or may not know. Mega Jane has been participating at the bike and ped committees, and I hope to mentor well, if you know what I mean. Thanks.
Thank you. Representative Gerber, you have a response to that?
Not so much as a response, but just to remind people that, Four Corners, that was a difficult project, right? And a fair amount of it was paid for by the residents there. Hopefully, in the future, if the town is looking at this proactively and potential, economic development in specific areas, and that the residents won't have to foot part of the bill. I think part of it, we did get fortunate with some ARPA money as well, right? Yeah. So, and which maybe sped it up, but those types of things should be routinely looked at to make the town better and certain areas more economically viable, and certainly for that neighborhood, that little section, there is some promise that it could be, a place that would thrive economically, maybe a little bit more even than currently.
I also want to mention the state delegation. They were the ones that got it started.
Thank you. Representative Brown.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Christine Brown, District 9. Bill, I had a question for you. I have visited communities that have implemented parts of complete streets or complete streets. And so I realized it's much bigger than sidewalks. It's really eye-opening to see how you can build street infrastructure to naturally slow traffic. And not just make it safer for pedestrians, but encourage walking. So I'm really excited about it. But my question is specifically about sidewalks. You mentioned that we have a $14.5 million budget to repair existing sidewalks. And I was under the impression, maybe naively, that it was the homeowner's responsibility to maintain their sidewalks. So can you explain what the difference is between what the homeowner's responsible for and what the town does?
Sure, it's fairly simple. In Fairfield, the homeowner is responsible for the short-term maintenance. If there's wet leaves all over the sidewalk, if there's snow, it's their, by town charter, their responsibility to shovel the sidewalk or clear the sidewalk. Any long-term repair would be the responsibility of the town. If the sidewalk starts to lift up due to a tree root, if, they're starting to get old, some of the sidewalks are 40 years old, they start to crack on their own, that would be the town's responsibility. The only other time that the homeowner would be is if they had like a tree cutting company or a moving van, like park on the sidewalk and smash it up for some reason. Then if they're caught, that would be their responsibility.
So
But
is
it's
that
just short term.
typical, or is that different from other? I know that's different from how Bridgeport, for instance, does it. It's different from the town in New Jersey where my husband grew up, how they do it. Like there, it's the homeowner's responsibility.
Yeah, I believe in the area here, Stratford and Bridgeport, you actually, not only, it's your responsibility, you actually get assessed for it as well. And in Fairfield, I want to say Trumbull, Monroe, those areas, it's the same as ours. So it does vary per community.
Okay, thanks.
Representative Burtz.
Steve Barretts, District 6, soon to be District 7. Not a lawyer, not a money person. I'm a retired teacher, so I spent about 36 years as explaining things to seventh graders. So forgive me if my questioning is rather simplistic, but I just want you to kind of listen to this out. I want to get a better understanding of the budgeting aspect of all this. If I'm not mistaken, the DPW has all of the streets in town on like a 10 or 15 year cycle to be repaved, something along those lines. And so what would happen is that when a certain amount of streets come up, they'd be looking at it. And if this ordinance was in place, applying some upgrades to some of the streets, maybe not on some of the other ones. And DPW, if I'm not mistaken, gets a paving budget from the town, and they do a very good job maximizing as much as they can, scheduled for that year with the budget that they are given. Now, with some upgrades on some of the streets, they may not perhaps get to as many streets as they would had there not been this ordinance in place. So the town will, the town would not get like a $10 million bill at the end of the year just because we put this ordinance into place. What would happen is whatever the town budgets for their paving, that would be in place. And in case there were upgrades, they might come back, DPW might come back to the town to ask for additional money, but we wouldn't have a big bill at the end of the first year for all these upgrades. In fact, these upgrades would most likely be put into place over a 10, 15, even more year time frame. Would that sound correct?
Well, it depends. We're working on budgets now. For the repair of existing, or what we call remediation, that's exactly right. When we go on a particular road, if it's typically a pavement cycle is 15 years. And so if we, I'm trying to think of one, but I'll just say Roland Road is on the list, then you would pave that, and then you would repair any existing sidewalks, ADA ramps, stuff like that. But if there's missing sections, then you now look at filling in the gaps, which makes sense, or providing a whole new sidewalk in. And that's where it could get very expensive depending on how you want to do it. It really does matter what's involved.
But we would know going into every year exactly what has been budgeted for paving and what the cost was. So it wouldn't be any unexpected costs at the end of each individual year. And if we wanted to get through this a little bit quicker, we'd add a little bit more money to the budget for 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it would take. Or if we don't, we can know it. So it's not going to be a big surprise bill at the end of any given year. Any kind of upgrades would kind of take place over a 15, 20-year period. So my opinion is if this might take a period of time, it's something that we kind of have to get started right away. So that's just my opinion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Go ahead, Representative Gerber.
I think that's a really good point. And I'm not in seventh grade anymore. But it's a great point in that this is a really long-term, this is to start something that is going to take 20 years to implement.
Representative Barahona.
Thank you, Representative Barahona, District 5, soon to be 6. Bill, you're right, Gerber. We are all volunteers, and so I can't thank you enough. We all have a million roles and responsibilities outside of this body, so the depth of research into this, I'd like to think we can trust one another on this body on both sides to, when someone is willing, as Representative Vergara was on noise, and you have been on this issue to do the level of research, I am incredibly grateful. And you're right, I think there were 25 hyperlinks, and I will admit, I don't know if anyone did 25 hyperlinks and read through them all, you get a super gold star. So thank you for that. I was door knocking this weekend, as probably most of you were, and this is the #1 issue I heard. I was on Naps Highway with a young family with a second grader at McKinley, and she said, let's just sit on my porch for a minute and watch how many people run the stop sign at the corner of McKinley, which I came in and out of for 9 years and saw firsthand multiple times. So when I hear we're rushing this, 6 blocks away last week, another pedestrian was killed, right? This noise wasn't a life and death issue. This is. And I worry that, I've only been on a year, but noise was my first experience, first go around with an ordinance, and I was struck by how seemingly unnecessarily prolonged that became. And it's hard not to feel like that could happen again. Meanwhile, our residents are at risk. Bill Hurley, the first time I had contact with you was on Lenox and Cardinal, and my concerns that as a walker to McKinley, there are no sidewalks on those streets. And Representative Horton made this point, Representative Georgiadis made it last month, that it's the squeaky wheel. So you're relying on residents who, and particularly in my district, who might be working multiple jobs, who don't have the bandwidth, might not even speak the language, can't read the English that's on the website to understand a town, call the town engineer and figure out how to do this, only to be turned down after a year and a half for a stop sign. One of the things you mentioned, Mr. Hurley, in our conversations was the street calming measures for trees. And that really surprised me, because I think we all think you add a stop sign, that helps, and you told me that that actually makes things worse in many cases. So I have a question about the trees, because as we know, the utility companies have been taking them down left, right, and center. Is there a one-for-one replacement when that happens within the town, and specifically in the same area which it has been taken out of? Because the one-for-one doesn't really help unless it's being replaced within that neighborhood. And Representative Gerber, is the tree, is that part of it, since that is one of the biggest calming measures that I understand in terms of speed, and is this considered in that?
Well, I'll start and I'll give it to Bill. Tree planting program. The town has one. They have a tree warden, and they have a plan in place of where the trees will go and get planted. If any are removed, I don't know if the policy is to just replace one in its place, do 2 for one, on the same street. You'd have to check with Jeff on that. And then, again, just another example of, I'm just trying to get a feel of it, where if we were to pave that neighborhood, which streets are gonna get the improvements, or they all get it or not. I'm just trying to figure that out and get a handle on it. The other thing I'll add is, again, maybe we don't brag enough or whatever, but the town has submitted a grant for $700,000 in the McKinley School area. And it would involve two of the streets anyway, and then Knapp's Highway to get sidewalks. We would connect the sidewalk from McKinley School to the bus shelter that's there on that Tungus Hill or Black Rock Turnpike, Tungus Hill. And that's one that's been on our hopper for a year or two. So I'm putting that in with the grant. And what made it easier for me, and again, this is, policy if you guys decide it, but it was helpful that we did have support. I already know we have support on Cardinal Street. So that's definitely one of the roads going in. And then I picked the other one. We'll see what happens, but I'm hoping the neighbors don't complain. But again, just showing that these are the things that already are in place, but you can decide. But that's what we have right now. There is a there is a prospect of getting that grant. Informal discussions. They like the application. We'll have to see. I think by next month they'll make the decision.
Thank you.
Representative Woke.
May I just make one?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so if you look under the definitions, under complete streets, and it gives a few examples, and this is obviously not complete. You can look at a manual from various towns around Connecticut to see more, but street trees are on, it's the second to last line of the first definition.
Thank you. Representative Woke.
Jay Wolk, District 5. I first want to thank Attorney Baldwin for all your help on this and your input. It is important. And to you, Bill Gerber, Representative Gerber, for everything you've done. And not but last least, to my friend Bill Hurley. So, Mr. Hurley, this is going to be directed. I know you remember when you worked on the project at Fairfield Woods in Melville, fixing that intersection. So I remember our representative, Kristen McCarthy-Vey, saying to me, it took quicker to get Obamacare approved than that intersection. So I know how long all these projects take. It doesn't surprise me. It's the way it is. It's what it is. I remember one of the things I want to bring up is I remember you working, and I think Representative Koskoff remembers when you came to us about the Kings Highway project. That was a tremendous improvement. That was one. It took a while, but we got that done. I remember asking you to put a turn signal in by Firestone, and I thank you. And I keep bringing this up, but that was very important, and you got that done. And somebody I think brought up about traffic lights, and so I know. And the question is, I know, Bill, that we have studies done by the Circle, by McDonald's. Number one, I remember you having a town hall meeting about that. And then also I remember you mentioning to me when we talked about traffic signals that it's happening on Black Rock Turnpike. That's being done. I'm not trying to negate all the other intersections in our town and neighborhoods where it does need sidewalks and stop signs. But are these projects close to getting done?
Some are in the final design stage, and they'll be going out to bid this winter. And others maybe they'll go out to bid in the spring or the summer. The one on Black Rock Turnpike, there's still a little bit of a delay. MetroCog, the state and the town are still working out some details, but the other projects we should be moving forward with for spring construction. We were hoping to get a couple of them in for the fall, may or may not. It depends when everything gets finalized.
So that that circle down by McDonald's, that's close, I'm hearing, right?
Well, no, no, not that one. And that one there is a three-part. I mean, I don't want to take up too much time, but there's, we did get a grant, 1.75 million for what we call Post Road East. And that's the jug handle for those, I always pick up old businesses. I think it was Fair Auto Supply. I think there was a doctor or a chiropractor on the edge there. There's still stone pillars, right near, the Post Road jug handle, and that area, which would then continue with the Grassmere Post. So we're working our way closer to the circle. State delegation, I think did approve or working with the governor for at least design on what we call the peanut roundabout or the double signal there at what we call the circle. And then the next phase after that would work our way towards North Benson. So that's a plan that we actually have in play for that. And the only other thing I want to just again mention with a lot of this stuff too is it really depends on, we're dealing with sometimes narrow right of way. I would love to put a sidewalk on Pequot Avenue. I think everybody in this room would want to, but the only way we'd be able to do it is if we take property, because we only have a 30-foot right of way in some sections. And with a road that's 24, 25 feet, and then you have hydrants and poles in the way, it's very frustrating because that's one I think we all would agree we'd like to see. And then there's other ones, Barlow, right by the school. There's that huge rock outcrop. And it's so frustrating that we can't widen the sidewalk. So sometimes you're limited with the topography, the right of way, utilities, things like that. But we do try to make it work out and go from there. So thank you, Jay.
Bill, and then last but not least, and I'm done after this. So I know you've been working on trying to get certain intersections where you can put a turn signal, not making a lane, but putting the signal like we did on Kings Highway to certain intersections. That's a safety issue too, saving from accidents at intersections. So thanks for doing that also.
Yeah, as mentioned, we're working with the state on 6 or 7 intersections regarding that. And then we have, the consultant that did our traffic inventory, our traffic signal inventory, we have them working on, because one of the improvements that is not listed on the state plan is Reef and Post Road. And so we're going to hire them and do the design for additional pedestrian enhancements at that intersection. So
thanks for everything, Bill.
Thank you, Representative Myers.
Jim Myers, District 8. I want to first just start by saying I second Representative Steele's comments on this ordinance. I agree totally with what you said about there's a lot of things in this that I agree with. I experienced some of these same frustrations, helping out one of my constituents on Mill Plain Road. I've learned a ton about the goal of this. I think this has been a great dialogue tonight. I do think we need more time. I think we need to give Town Attorney Baldwin more time to do his due diligence. But the one comment I wanted to make here was that, I'm a little concerned about Representative Barrett's comment about the potential costs. And I think you're oversimplifying it. I really do. I don't think it's just a matter of taking the paving budget and spreading it out and maybe adding to it. I look at Reading Road, which I thought was, we were talking about this a month ago, one of the major concerns of a road that we wanted to make safer. And, paving that road and, putting the rumble strips and the fog lights, I think that's a great improvement. But I don't think I would walk that road if those things were done. I would want, I'd want a tank, but I would definitely want sidewalks. And based on Mr. Gerber's first comments about the cost of sidewalks and the size, I know how long that road is. That road it goes from Hull's Highway, Hull's Farm, all the way to Easton. And I don't know, maybe we're only talking about certain parts of that road, but You know, and sadly, even with a sidewalk, that road was not safe. So, you know, we've talked about, you know, I mean, there's a lot of issues with drivers in this town. There's a lot of issues with drivers who don't belong in this town. It's not just somebody who, you know, 1 minute they're arguing about safe roads and the next minute they're speeding. There are drivers that don't even live in this town. I'm not saying they don't care about Fairfield residents, but they're speeding through town to get from maybe 95 to the Merritt. And that's the road you take. You take Reading Road. And there's drunk drivers. You know, I don't know if this ordinance addresses drunk driving, but, you know, when I'm walking on a sidewalk, I'm looking to see if the car coming towards me is erratic, if they're looking down at their phone. And, I mean, just because I'm on a sidewalk, I don't think I'm safe. I mean, I got my dog and I'm thinking I might have to dodge something today. So I am super sensitive to all these issues. And I don't know if all of these measures or some of these measures are going to solve all the problems. I think it's a very big, complex issue. And, you know, I'm for a lot of these ideas. And I think this town really needs to think about it and decide, do we want to invest in this? And if we're going to do it, we got to do it the right way. Because, you know, you can't just put a Band-Aid on it and tell everybody you're safe just because we did certain things. But anyway.
Thank you for that commentary. This, again, would give the engineering department discretion in making recommendations. And if they wanted an exemption altogether, they would go through the process. But, you know, I would recommend looking at some of the material. I mean, you could just Google complete streets and a million things will pop up, but some of the handbooks that you'll find show things that can be done. And it's not just sidewalks. So sidewalks may not be practical on Reading Road, but as Bill knows, you know, there are different ways to slow people down. And you're right, nothing works 100%, but there are things called chicanes where, you know, where you change you know, where you have like a bend in the road, just like a turn, like a little bit of a, you know, what would you call it? A jiggy.
You had it right, chicane.
Yeah, now how would you explain it? But you can look up chicane, and there's a whole, and as a matter of fact, I was really excited to see that, you know, the Four Corners project, you're putting in a movie in there, right? Or have you already put it in? Yeah, they're putting in these are things that are part of a discipline, you know, which is street architecture. You know, these people study this and they get degrees in it. And, you know, Bill's been doing this for years and Bill knows what you can do. It's just the question of, you know, maybe we haven't done much of it here. But if you go to other towns, once you start looking at these handbooks and manuals that are all over the place that other towns are looking at, you start to notice these things. And you'll go to another town, you'll see a crosswalk that is actually raised up a little bit, you know, and you'll say, wow, this crosswalk is a hell of a lot easier to cross on, and you feel safer crossing on this than just a normal crosswalk. And there's a lot of, it's a discipline, and this is meant to actually have a review. And so like a process where we require a review and a recommendation from Mr. Hurley, most likely, and then, you know, if there's going to be an exemption, there'll be an exemption. But we don't have a transparent formal process right now, and I agree, sidewalks may not work in most places.
Representative McCormick.
Karen McCormick, District 2. I just want to start by asking, well, as an attorney by training, my career as an attorney, my understanding is that an ordinance which becomes law needs to be clear and unambiguous in order for it to be enforceable. In fact, there's some constitutionality potential ramifications of laws and ordinances if they're not clear and unambiguous. So the first question I have for Mr. Gerber is, under the ordinance, I believe it's subsection 4, you have a section that describes exceptions, or you review what is called an exception. What is the definition of an exception, and where is the definition in the ordinance?
So look at, so subsection 4, part D, exceptions may include, but are not limited to, and then
So if Mr. Hurley and his group didn't have funding for something, for example, that doesn't qualify as an exception under this definition.
no.
So under the ordinance, if there wasn't funding for a particular project that was part of the Safe Streets Initiative, that would not qualify as a viable exception for Mr. Hurley to seek under this ordinance.
So if Mr. Hurley didn't have the budget to do the review,
If, for example, there was a project being put forth, repaving of a street, under the definition of this ordinance, there are certain purposes and goals that have to be achieved, including your Vision Zero definition here, the rights of way, all of those things. If for example, there needed to be some kind of an improvement made to a particular street that was being repaved, how could Mr. Hurley seek an exception for installing those improvements under the Safe Streets policy if he didn't have the appropriate funding in place to do that?
well, the exception is for doing the review of the street, not the review of the street. If there's something needed in that street or should be put on that street to make it safer, in his opinion, and he has no budget to do that, then it would have to wait till the following year.
And where does it say that in the ordinance?
Well, it just says there's an exception process, and the exception process is for the streets review for that street. So if he does the review and puts it in, and it's then, and it gets approved by, or he puts it through and it gets approved by the police commission, which is the LTA, it has to be done.
Who is the petitioner and how is that defined under this ordinance?
The petitioner is the complete streets coordinator. So the town recognizes that blah, 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 blah. In such case, a petition documenting the reasons for an exception shall be made by a petitioner or petitioning body to the complete streets coordinator. So ultimately, it would be the complete streets coordinator that will be submitting that to the LTA.
So just to be clear, that you use the word petitioner in this document, but I don't see where that's defined. Is that accurate?
Well, petition is defined. In such case, a petition.
I understand that you use the word petition, but the specific definition of who a petitioner is not defined in the ordinance, correct?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Baldwin, did you have something to follow up there?
Yeah, if I may, as I understand it, the Complete Streets Coordinator first comes up with the master plan. That is is that right, Bill? Comes up with the Complete Streets Plan within 12 months of the passage of this ordinance.
Yeah.
And that plan has to include every single street, every mile in the town of Fairfield. Bill, how many miles do we have? 235 miles of roadway in the town of Fairfield. A complete streets analysis for every inch of those roads needs to be completed within 12 months. And this is a genuine question. And so it's based on that plan, which is created by the coordinator, him or herself, that would be the template for any street improvements, whether it's paving or anything along those lines. And when the time comes for that street improvement to take place, it would have to be done consistent with that master plan, the Complete Streets Plan. And if it was 10 years later that was about to take place and the coordinator is no longer there, then I guess that coordinator could petition for an exemption or any other circumstance which would call for the exemption. I'm just trying to understand the ordinance.
I'm trying to,
is that basically the outline here? So you're, the first part of this ordinance is the creation of the Complete Streets Plan, which must be created after public hearings, discussion, and everything else after, within 12 months time, 230 miles and 235. 275, sorry. So, and then, and only then, is the street repair, wherever it is, it's required to be completed in accordance with that plan.
I'm sorry, where, the 12 months, I think, was referencing the design manual. Where did you find the 12 months for the streets?
Well, this goes back to my original question about where is that plan? I thought it was the very broadly general description that is, as you described it, the September 26, 2018 Complete Streets Plan.
Yeah, but the way you're describing it, I don't think that's described that way anywhere in this ordinance about a detailed.
I'm just trying
plan of the street. No, but you just made that up. So no,
I'm not making it up. I'm asking a genuine question. I'm trying to understand the connection between the if a street next month and this ordinance is passed, that street cannot possibly comply with the ordinance because the plan or the right-of-way manual or whatever it is that needs to be done within 12 months is not in existence yet. Is that correct? Or 1 month after this ordinance is passed, it must comply with something. And if it must comply with something, what is that thing? Show me or identify it. Is it just or was it subject to the discretion, complete discretion of the coordinator?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Welcome to my world, trying to make sense of this ordinance.
We have a bike pedestrian master plan here. It doesn't have already we have one that doesn't have every street and every little thing on it. It's a general plan. Then you have a 12-month plan, which is part of your budgeting process.
So can you explain to me what happens with a street after the passage of this ordinance that is going to be paved? let's say in theory, even though the season is not for paving, but let's say that it was next month, what would the process be?
Gentlemen, I might be able to help you here. I think what Attorney Baldwin is referring to is, it begins on, at least on my page 5, it's section 3, implementation B, right-of-way manual, and it discusses what the complete streets manual will look like when it has to be adhered to. And in part C, it says, a complete streets plan shall include a list of planned projects, each with priority level, timing of work, budget, expenditure, so on and so forth. And that plan has to be completed within 12 months, if I'm reading this correctly.
It'll include a 12-month fiscal year plan. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm just reading the language, and I'm not going to challenge you guys for this, by the way.
No,
This is.
I'm sorry. Which, are you talking about A? The complete streets plan shall include a 12-month fiscal year plan, which is.
No, if you look in section 3, implementation, it begins on page 5. And then if you go to section B, it talks about the right-of-way manual, and you've got A, B, C, D, and then even C, it says you have to have a complete list of planned projects.
It'll include a list of planned projects. It doesn't include it's a list of planned projects.
Jim doesn't want it.
But why does it say that complete streets plan that includes every street, that includes everything you're going to do on every street, 375 miles of road? That just sounds like hyperbole to me.
It was not a comment, it was a question. Believe me when I say that, it was a genuine question.
Okay. I mean, we regularly create frameworks, planning frameworks, and then have projects to achieve those frameworks. I mean, that's what most of our plans do, including theoretically the current bike pedestrian master plan. I think that was the purpose of it.
Okay, so past year, the town paved 60 miles. Is that right?
And right, so all 60 miles, they would have to review the 60 miles that we're going to pave in this plan and decide and fill out a form as to what we should be including in those paving projects. So Bill is going to be part of the paving process. They're not going to start paving until they get the okay from Bill. And that's going to actually ultimately save money, because right now they pave. Someone gets in an accident, someone dies, then we go back, we have a process, and then we put things in after the fact. So this is a way to get things done while we're doing the improvements.
Can I go back to my question of who is the petitioner under the exceptions paragraph?
That would be Bill.
It's the same person who creates the plan, which.
No, he's saying it's Mr. Hurley.
Mr. Hurley is going to look at the streets that are going to be paved this year, and if there's something in a remote section of town, he's going to say, this doesn't make sense. That's sort of the way these plans work in every town. So I you should probably look at what other towns are doing. He's really the one who is in the position to say, putting safety measures in on some remote stretch that maybe has 2 cars a day and 0 walkers. We should not be bothering with that. So we're not going to submit an analysis on that, but it's going to get paved.
Except that the definition of your exceptions don't include that exception. That's the problem. Definitions do not include a discretion of Bill Hurley to decide that that's a road that's heavily traveled, and therefore he can apply for an exception. It's not.
If you want that, add that, I can, but it gives discretion to Bill because there's some loose language in there, as you can probably see.
Well, that's the problem that I have with the ordinance, is that you can't have loose language when you're seeking enforcement of a clear and unambiguous law. That's the problem. I'll move on from that particular line of questioning because that is.
Can I just jump back to where we were with when Mr. Astrida kind of helped me out with the language? So, but doesn't the plan depend upon the right-of-way manual, which does require a 12-month period?
The right-of-way manual is a handbook of the types of things that we're going to allow to be done in town under different circumstances. You can check them out. You can find 10 of them probably in about 15 minutes.
Yeah, I've looked at a few, but my point being that the plan that Bill is required to submit for the upcoming budget for those next 60 miles of roadway has to be consistent with the right-of-way manual, which isn't going to be in existence for 12 months. Or if I got.
He has 12 months to if he's going to rewrite it, he could take Stanford's or Norwalk's or whatever.
Well, this makes it mandatory. So until that manual is in existence, for example, the next 60 miles may not be subject to this ordinance. Not one, right?
Right. And so do you want to change the timing? Make a suggestion.
I think it's up for the body to decide whether it ultimately wants to do that, but I can certainly make recommendations on that point and some others, sure.
Yeah, I don't think that's a problem if you want to make a recommendation.
I just want to say that instead of referencing Mr. Hurley, please say town engineer. There's too much pressure. Thank you.
There's no retirement in sight for you. All right, I'm not done. I'm not done.
I'm still not really clear exactly what you're getting, to be honest. So why don't you write it down and send me? I don't know what you're asking. He's got 12 months to put a streets and a manual, right-of-way manual together.
Right, but we enact the ordinance, let's just say next week. So the ordinance is in place. We have to pave over the course of the next 12 months. We have roads that need to get paved. And what I think Attorney Baldwin is saying is that during that 12-month period, because there's not a manual in place.
That's easily solvable, though.
Well, you asked what the question was.
Okay, so that's easily solvable.
I don't know if it's easily solvable or not. I'm just saying that that's what the question is.
If it's an enactment, stage enactment, that's just a couple sentences.
Okay, I'm just pointing out what the question was. But
Okay.
Moving on, my big question actually, which is kind of evidence from these back and forth conversations that you're having with Attorney Baldwin, is why didn't you consult with Attorney Baldwin before consulting with attorneys, or even after consulting with attorneys and all sorts of experts outside the state of Connecticut, inside the state of Connecticut? Why haven't you met with Attorney Baldwin to review this?
I really don't want to answer that question. I don't think it's appropriate for me to answer that.
Okay, I appreciate your response and your candor. Thank you. Moving on, Mr. Hurley, what will the projected impact be on paving projects if this ordinance were to be enacted the way it is?
Well, again, it will vary. I looked real quick back of the envelope situation, looking at all the streets in 2023 and 2024. It could cost up to $5 million if you were to provide sidewalks, traffic calming for each of the streets that were paved that didn't have the improvements. Because again, these are going to be two different pots of money. The one pot of money is going to be for existing, and it's going to come out of paving. Anything new would have to be a capital item, as Bill or anybody else has alluded to. It would have to be a capital item. And that would be 5 million. Now, if you only did half of the projects, the other half were exempt, it would be 2.5 million, as an example. Now it will vary year to year.
Okay, with respect to timing of the paving projects, do you envision, based upon the proposal here, that the ordinance could or would delay the paving of streets in the town of Fairfield?
It would probably delay the paving of the streets. What's going to happen is, even if you do traffic calming measures, if you do sidewalk, all that, we have to get right of way. We have to do a survey. You have to worry about drainage, the impacts of drainage and all that. And that's why a lot of these projects, even if it appears to be simple, can take 6 to 9 months before you do the data collection, as I said, you do the right of way, the survey, then you have to do the design. That paving a road, if you mill and pave, like we were just mentioning, the section by the Four Corners, that could be done in a week. A sidewalk, if it's just a replacement, maybe it only takes that long. But for a new sidewalk, there's a lot of things that you have to assume. The utilities, you have to assume. As I said, right of way, you don't want to build a sidewalk on someone's property. It's all different. So, and then the other thing would be is if we were waiting or just coming up with a plan, that could affect the paving. And then going back to the other gentleman's question there with the, finance, if they have 3 million in paving, if for some reason they don't implement any new additional funding, then does that mean the paving goes down to 2.5 million and you do 500,000 for complete streets or whatever? Those are the things I don't know yet. So I hope that answers the question.
Okay.
It will affect the paving schedule. There's no doubt about it.
In the form of delays.
Right. How much? I can't tell you. I'd have to probably refer to DPW people for that.
And the reference you're making to the delays, that's not even including state roads, if we have to deal with the state of Connecticut, is that correct?
That would be correct, but most likely, unless it's a large project, we wouldn't be paving the state road though. But it would, yeah, for Stratfield, because we touched the curbs, now we have to pave the intersection. So in that case, that's why it takes a long time. That was part of the review. That's why that project took longer than it typically would.
I just want to point out.
May I ask a question? So, I mean, what you're talking about with delays, you're talking about the assessment will delay paving or the actual work will delay paving?
It could go either way. If a road was, say, right now the season's wrapping up, if there's 2 streets that are scheduled to be paved, and then I have to, or the town engineer or whoever has to look at, or the coordinator has to look at those streets, and come up with some traffic calming. And then if there's an exemption, you know what I mean, then yeah, it could delay 30 to 60 days according to the ordinance.
Just as a follow-up to the liability question, I think Representative Zezima had asked some questions to Attorney Baldwin, and I have a couple of follow-ups on that. With respect to the zero vision language, which specifically says that it describes the belief that even one life lost in a traffic crash is unacceptable, traffic deaths are preventable, and a commitment to using all available tools to eliminate conditions and behaviors that lead to serious injuries and deaths. Do you, as the town attorney, envision at all a problem with that language in terms of creating an affirmative liability for the town in the event that, for example, somebody is seriously injured and uses the ordinance and perhaps an exception that was taken by the town for whatever reason, and that this would create some kind of new liability for the town, knowing that we have affirmatively enacted an ordinance that requires us to do certain things and that we didn't comply with our obligations under the ordinance, and therefore the loss of life or serious injury results in additional liability to the town as a result of the language here.
Yeah, the highway statute you're familiar with, right? and governmental immunity that goes hand in hand with it. If there is a defect, it'd be untested. I'm not familiar with any cases on point. So it would open the door for that argument. Obviously, I would disagree with that claim, but anyone can bring a lawsuit, right? And whether it would survive summary judgment motion, as those cases so often do. But for this language and the mandatory aspect of it, I can't answer your question other than to say that it might open that door.
Okay, and then finally, I just wanted
May
to ask.
may I ask a question, or?
Sure.
Yeah. So are you referring to you're referring to the section where it mentions that the right-of-way manual is prepared in accordance with the Vision Zero Council?
Can you tell me which section you're,
We're talking about Vision Zero, and that is implementation 3B. So a right-of-way manual shall be developed and periodically updated, blah, 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 department designees, and then at the last sentence, and prepared in accordance with the Vision Zero Council and other relevant guidelines.
I'm referring to your definition section on page 3.
But the definitions are relating to this section. Right?
Yes.
So the Vision Zero Council is what the right-of-way manual is designed with those goals in mind of the Vision Zero Council. I just want to make sure you understand how it's used.
I don't know what you mean by Vision Zero Council. I don't see the word council in the section that I'm referring to. It just says Vision Zero describes a belief that even one life lost in a traffic crash is unacceptable. That's what it says.
Right, that's the definition, so that people, I mean, there's a lot of things in this document that people have never seen before, so it's defined so that people know what we're talking about.
Right, and my question for the town attorney was whether or not the fact that that was one of our goals here creates additional liability for the town because of the affirmative and the mandatory language here, that we're required to do these things. And I asked the town attorney if that.
I just want to make sure you know the way it's used is that the right-of-way manual is prepared in accordance with.
Right, yeah, but that means that the Safe Streets plan is to create an environment where there is a vision, presumably, that there's zero loss of life. That's the way I read that.
Well, there is a Vision Zero Council of Connecticut, and, there's a Vision Zero Council that has guidelines about what you should do to attempt to have zero loss of life.
I understand that, but the ordinance is a four-cornered document, and we can't start referring to outside councils in an ordinance. I mean, when somebody looks at the intention of this ordinance, they're going to look at the language that's clearly here. And my question was whether or not that creates a firm.
Okay, I just want to make sure you know that you're looking at a definition of Vision Zero and not how it's used in the implementation.
I'm fully aware of that, yes. And lastly, I just want to point out that it's been mentioned sort of, I think Attorney Myers kind of made reference to this, and I'd like to point out, number one, the person who was killed 6 blocks from where Representative Barahona lives was not a pedestrian, and that should be made clear for the record. There has not been a full investigation yet, but the information that I'm aware of is that that person was an employee of a carting company, and that was not related to necessarily related to a Safe Streets issue. The other issue was we did have a death a few years back now that was related to somebody who was participating in criminal activity and was driving under the influence and killed somebody. And although that incident happened on a road that perhaps does have some concerns about its safety, I think we've got to be very careful about making blanket statements that just because an accident happened on a particular road, that traffic calming measures or any type of planning could have avoided that type of tragedy. That was a criminal act created, caused by criminal behavior. And, you know, unfortunately, if we don't have the manpower, the staff, the attention, the ability to focus on issues related to traffic enforcement, we're going to see problems. We're going to see people getting injured. And those issues may not be resolved and probably won't be resolved through traffic calming measures, sidewalks, distracted driving, and certainly substance abuse issues and people getting behind the wheel are not going to be solved by these problems. That doesn't mean that the goals here aren't certainly things that we should work towards, but it shouldn't be, we shouldn't be like knee-jerk reacting saying, well, we had a death, just a few days ago, and that was a pedestrian, and we had somebody else killed on Reading Road, and that was a pedestrian. I mean, we have to be very careful how we go about this. That doesn't mean that we don't have improvements to make in the town of Fairfield, but I just want to be clear that, each case on a case-by-case basis needs to be analyzed and looked at, and we can't throw every tragedy into the same bucket and say, we need this ordinance and we need it now because we can't afford to have one more person lose their life. I mean, we need to be very measured about this, and we need to be mindful of the fiscal implications, the tax dollars, and it's completely expected for us to be doing our due diligence here. And quite frankly, I just see way too many problems and questions that still exist here. And I'm very concerned about the fact that there wasn't a consultation with the town attorney prior to putting this together. And relying on third parties that you refuse to disclose to this body is quite frankly unacceptable to me. And we're not just going to take your word for it that these are experts in the field. But I appreciate your work. I think that there's more work that needs to be done to make this palatable and something that I would support. Thank you.
Do you want to respond to that, Representative Gerber?
No, not
Okay,
really.
great.
Yeah.
All right, Representative Britton.
So basically, Peter Britton, District 10. It seems to me, Bill, that in the interest of bipartisan, of making sure everybody is on board with this, that you wouldn't really want to put this in front of us in a vote. I don't think we want to rush this vote, first off. So the idea of having to do it next week because there might be new players coming in, I don't think is a valid reason to force the vote next week, if you will. I understand you think the thing's ready to go, but from my perspective, and I think from many of my colleagues, and I think you've heard enough tonight to say that, until we have the confidence of our town attorney having reviewed this, and I would think, honestly, you would want that, right, in terms of having a quote-unquote unanimous, hopefully, view on this, that it's hard for us to support it, right, at this point in time. I certainly don't want to feel rushed, as I say, at one point. I don't think that's fair because we've only had 2 months. And secondly, the fact that the town attorney, Jim, hasn't really had a chance to review this to the point that, to the points that Karen, has raised here, would seem only right that we all get ourselves comfortable with this before we put it forward, right? And I would hope that you would think along those same lines, right? That let's make sure that the town is comfortable with this ordinance, AKA law, right, before we try to push it through. That's sort of summarizing where I think our team is, if you will.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the way you present things, Peter. I appreciate it. Maybe I'm used to the corporate world, but I think by next week, Attorney Baldwin will have had a month to review this. So, and it's been on, it's been out there on the website for more than a month, but I get it. It's not terribly complicated in my view, but I know he's a very busy man, so.
Can I just respond? So that's the point, right? He needs to have time. And if we're going to come here next week and get his comments, we'll have to vote immediately based on, his comments coming back in, right? Unless he's going to send out a memo with all the details of his comments. But that to me is my issue, right? That next Monday, we're going to vote on this. And by then, Jim will and his team will have had a chance to review it in detail to the point we can really get these questions answered such that other attorneys have.
I get it. I mean, I would like to reiterate, this has been posted on the town website since July 28th. And that's 3 months. So that'll be 3 months. And,
Yeah, if I may, I enjoyed this dialogue tonight, and I regret for whatever reasons that Representative Gerber was reluctant to have this dialogue sooner, but I would encourage it after this meeting. It doesn't have to be in a full RTM meeting. I'm perfectly capable of meeting with the sponsors of this bill and any other interested parties and going over the many questions I still have and trying to marry the noble concept to what should be a clear and unambiguous ordinance. I just don't think that 1 week's time is sufficient to do that. And I think that everybody in this room can appreciate that predicament that I'm now put in.
yeah, I mean, the fact that it's 1 week's time, is partially 1 week's time that and I mean, this has been circulated 3 months ago.
Bill, you just said that you consciously chose not to have any dialogue with me, and I think that that's the next
history.
That's the next
way you have treated my I don't want to get into it, but on charter revision and other things, it has not been productive.
I'm sure that Representative Vergara and Wackerman will say that when I was working with them on their ordinances, I did nothing but what was in the best interest of the RTM at that time. And I wouldn't behave any differently here.
Madam, I don't know that anybody needs to justify their behavior on anything.
I think we can move on from here at any point. Does anyone that hasn't had any question, there's like 4 of us that haven't spoken at the table, or anyone online have any questions? I know Representative Steele has a second question. Anyone have Okay, so we have Representative Steele and Representative Barahona.
Amy Ruggiero, District 10, District 1. Can I speak for a moment?
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you. As I was walking this weekend, as it was referenced before, I'm very appreciative and thankful for everybody that dedicates their time, no matter what party they're on, to do what we do, because it is an enormous amount of work and dedication with very little upside from, making everyone happy, I should say. Representative Gerber, you've mentioned several times on this call that, when there's been a question asked, if you have the votes, let's see what happens with the votes. But there's been a lot of questions asked where, there are genuine concerns where, I live in Greenfield Hill and I used to walk on Reading, and I haven't gone walking since the tragedy occurred. And I'm very alarmed and concerned with the safety of our streets. But, we have to make sure that we're doing our due diligence for our taxpayers, and we have no idea what this cost is going to be. And, I want to have safe streets as well. But, when you reference if you have the votes, you have the votes. So that doesn't take into account a lot of constituents that are concerned with our budget and where the money is going to come from. And I was asked about that specifically this weekend. And we're not addressing that. And we need time to vet all this and to understand what the cost is going to be. And I would love to do that and see where that takes us. But I do not understand why there is such a push to have this vote to occur next week. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And I would like to understand, why this can't be looked at further. I understand there was apprehension to involve the town attorney, as you've expressed, but Doesn't that need to be done? I mean, he does represent the town, as we do.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Rosario. True, all true. He does have a chance. I think he has had a chance. And I also think that this document has been in the hands of my colleagues on the RTM for 3 months almost. And this is really the first, maybe last month we had some questions, but this is the first substantive discussion we've had on this. I know people don't focus until they have to, but you know, I'm not going to be on this body one way or the other. You know, in November, I'm not going to be here to push this through. It is my opinion that this is ready with some small tweaks. I really do appreciate, I think this was a phenomenal conversation that we had tonight. I think this is a discussion that I don't recall ever having in this depth. I'm not sure until this came up that people on this body even knew what the word complete streets meant. So this has been a really, really worthwhile discussion. But, you know, there are times where, you know, I kind of feel like if people didn't read and didn't reach out to me, that we did make an effort to try to get Republican co-sponsors. None stood up. At some point, you know, the good of the town is to pass this. And the fact that no one weighed in prior to this, you know, I feel like that is somewhat of the fault of the people who didn't weigh in, because you know where I live, you know my address, you know my email address. I was willing to bring people on board. I don't think it has to be my responsibility to get people to focus. You're focusing now, and you know what? We still have a week to go. So, you know, Attorney Baldwin has formally had this in his hands for over 3 weeks, but informally, he's known about it and I assume seen it for 3 months almost. You know, at some point, you know, I think it's kind of up to you up to the body to make an effort. And I've made a huge effort on this, but I do appreciate that regardless of what this body decides to do, even if this fails, this has been an amazing exercise in that we're finally talking about an issue publicly, openly, in a more informed way than we ever have. I think it should pass next week. But you know, a week is a long time, and if you were to get me your comments, I will consider them.
May I respond to that?
Go ahead.
I myself won't be on this body after the election as well, so I understand what you're saying. But I know that there are many, many colleagues and people on your side that are wonderful and very dedicated to carry this mission through, that I would be very confident could do so. And I would just respectfully ask you to consider not pushing this for a vote next week and giving it the time that I think it needs based on everything we've heard this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I would if I had heard anything that made me think we needed to delay, but I haven't heard anything like that yet.
All right, has anyone else on WebEx that hasn't spoken, or anyone here that hasn't spoken on this topic have any question? On WebEx, I prefer if you put it in the chat. I just want to remind you, I believe in 15 minutes, we have to make a motion if we continue this meeting. So hopefully Representative Steele and Representative Barahona have quick questions. I'll go to Representative Steele.
Thank you. Yes, just a quick question and then a comment. Bill Hurley, thank you for coming tonight because that was very helpful and it's great to have a department head weigh in on this. Bill Weber, did you mention you did talk to the Director of Public Works?
No, I have not. I offered, I mean, I sent him all the information. I have not heard from him.
Okay. And then just my comment, I think what we've witnessed tonight, just in the last hour and a half, shows that this is a complex issue. I mean, I think it's more complex than the noise ordinance. There's many moving parts to it. So it's fine if you don't think it is, but I think it's more complex, and I think it therefore does take more than 3 months to go through. And, you know, there are some of us who've been on LNA, we looked at it now for a month and a half, 2 months, but most of the members, we said this is the first time we've discussed it. And I think what we witnessed showed really that it's not fully baked. And Bill, this is not a criticism. This is just my thought. It's just, there's still questions. There's questions around policies, definitions, exemptions, policy procedures, liability issues. There's somewhat loose language. There's the term of, well, we can be flexible, but I don't think an ordinance allows you to be flexible based on the mandatory language of an ordinance. So I just still think there's other things that need to be addressed. And, you know, there is an issue of bringing this to the town attorney at the last minute. I mean, it's important he weighs in. Forget political affiliation, he has to weigh in. And then
it's not.
Okay, I retract that comment. And the DPW director, I mean, I think that's important. In any case, and then we as a body are still reviewing it. So you said you want to make this transparent and easy to understand, but it's not quite there yet, even for us. And so I found it kind of interesting when you mentioned some sort of criticism of the speed and the pace of the 2018 plan, yet you yourself said this is going to be a 20-year process. So there was that kind of stuck in my mind. And lastly, you know, I think there are plenty of people here who will be here in the next term that can carry this forward. I don't think this means this has to die. And as I said, I'm very interested. Do we all necessarily want to be co-sponsors? Maybe some do, maybe we don't for any, but we still all have to weigh in on things and review them and vote on it. It doesn't mean we have to all be co-sponsors. But in any case, I think this can still be discussed into the next term. There's no reason it can't be. And you know, you began that process. There are plenty to carry this torch forward, but let's get some of these things nailed down. Clearly what we saw shows there's some questions. That's all.
Thank you, Representative Barahona.
Yeah, Representative Barahona, District 5. I just want to respond to Representative McCormick. Yeah, thank you. You're right. That was not a kind of pedestrian death that we think about it, but it was an accident on a very narrow roadway. And it's the same type of issues that Representative Wolk and I fought with planning and zoning against building on Berkeley because of the narrow roads, parking on both sides of the street. So my assumption is the investigation of that tragedy with that employee is going to show that a large garbage truck on a narrow street where cars are on both sides with difficult viewing very likely played a factor in that tragedy that occurred. So I agree, we're not chalking up every death that occurs. There's drunk drivers, we're not going to prevent all of that. But I think this ordinance is going to go a long way in helping some of the narrow streets, particularly in my district where people are speeding and there's not a good way to view and there's parking on both sides to be taken into account. So I just want to make that point.
Thank you, Representative Gale.
Sorry, Representative Gale, District 6. So today I saw something on social media about Oxford where they're having a major protest over this low speed zone that obviously was implemented with this kind of legislation. And so, you know, you mentioned before that there's this issue of having to redo things. Well, that's what's going on there because they implemented all these things without thinking through the consequences. And it turns out that there are all sorts of issues of slowing things down, like slowing down ambulances and other issues that are being brought up by the town. So, you know, this is kind, you know, I don't mean to call it faddish, but, you know, these things happen you know, because these things become popular, and then it takes some time before the issues start to be brought out. You know, in our particular town, we're dealing with situations where, you know, people are wearing lights on their heads as they're walking against traffic, walking their dogs. The idea that we would be like overly concerned with raising a crosswalk because it feels more comfortable is just not appropriate to our town. So I really do think that it's prudent for us to wait and find out what the issues are that are showing up in other towns that are implementing these things.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? All right, we're going to break into committees. If you don't have a quorum, if you could just still send in a note to the moderator that you did not have a quorum. Oh, wait 1 second.
I just sort of, again, the debate on this has been phenomenal, and I really appreciate everyone weighing in. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed and Rec will come here, but I don't think we have a quorum.